trust myself. I need you to make it turn. Will you follow me when the sky starts to change? Yeah, we won't be afraid. We'll never be the same again. Will you follow me? We won't leave it to chance. We can't write our romance. We'll never be the same again. I could keep the light from turning into darkness. You'd be my escape. What have we been told? Easy to unfold. Future might seem every spot we're getting close. Will you follow me when the sky starts to change? Yeah, we won't be afraid. We'll never be the same again. Will you follow me? We won't leave it to chance. We can't write our romance. We'll never be the same again. Will you follow me when the sky starts to change? Yeah, we won't be afraid. We'll never be the same again. Will you follow me when the sky starts to change? Yeah, we won't be afraid. We'll never be the same again. Will you follow me? We won't leave it to chance. We can't write our romance. We'll never be the same
You're streaming with the Fantasy Follow. We're into week 4. It's waiver wire night. The Tuesday waiver show is here from the Fantasy Follow, and it starts right now. It's a big day of football. You can do this. Make those good decisions. There's never a better time than this week. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Follow. This is the TFF Live Tuesday waiver show. We welcome you in here. We got a great night of content for you, getting you ready for your waiver wires for week 4 and talking about all of your fantasy football questions. As always, we are here to take your questions. The chat pinned at the top of your chat there is open for the entire show. Even if we are talking about other content, feel free to drop us a question. That is what we were here for, and that is what we love to do. It's Tuesday, so it's time to get those waiver priorities ready, waiver claims ready for week 4. Try to bolster your team. We got plenty of content to go over on all of those players. But let's start the show tonight by talking about the Fantasy Follow 6 picks game. It is about to be underway for week 4, and we'll take a look at our current season leaderboard for the 6 picks games. It is Chris Noriega currently with the lead. Vansco moves into second place on the board, and Bill Romanowski holding down third. Leaderboard by percentage, because we know some players will play different amount of weeks than others. So that's how we are calculating it. Yet keep an eye out for the 6 picks video for this week. Very simple how to play that game. Just look for that video. Comment your winners to the 6 matchups in the comment section below on that video. In order to play using PPR scoring, you're basically going to pick the players that you think are going to have the better fantasy scoring day out of all those matchups. We'll keep those standings all season long, as you've seen, and those picks will close at 1 o'clock on Sunday. So we will have a brand new set of picks for you for week 4 coming up this week. All right, before we start with our content, we got an early chat here, so let's jump right into it. That's what we're here for. Jason Kenobi, welcome, Jason. Looks like you might be a new viewer to the stream here. If you are, welcome, glad to have you. You ask, going to be a lot of trade talk tonight, I'm sure. Should I trade Evans and Claypool for Hill PPR? I don't think there's anything wrong with making this deal. I think this is a good deal for you if you can get it. To me, Mike Evans right now probably at about his height in terms of fantasy value for this season. He has been playing well, but of course that has been helped by the fact that Antonio Brown has been out a little bit. There certainly are a lot of mouths to feed there in Tampa Bay. Now, I will say this, with the fact that Scotty Miller, it looks like is going to be out injured for quite some time. Of course, we don't ever want to see any players injured, but that takes one person out of the equation there. So you would think that Mike Evans might have a little bit better chance of continuing that production, but you've still got a Godwin, a Gronk. Gronk's injury could play a role in this in terms of whether or not you feel like Evans is somebody that you are selling high on or expecting him to continue this production. Claypool, same situation here with Deontay Johnson out. I always feel that Chase Claypool is the biggest benefactor of Deontay Johnson's injury problems there for Pittsburgh. We saw a ton of targets this week. I think that will continue. When Johnson comes back, he is their target leader, in my opinion. So that means that Claypool's value right now is a little bit higher than it might be for the entire season. So, yes, if you're looking for 2 players with high value at this point, Evans and Claypool, to me, are them. If you can swing those for a Tyreek Hill and losing that depth amongst your wide receivers right now doesn't hurt you, perhaps that person that you're looking to trade with needs the extra depth on their wide receiver side of the ball. So, yes, I think this is a reasonable deal to go out and try to make. If you can get it, I think Tyreek Hill has, obviously been a very good player in fantasy. A little bit of a down week last week might help your chances of actually pulling off this trade. So, Jason Kenobi, stop back and let us know if this works out for you. I think this is a good deal in your favor. I think Hill is the best player in this trade, and I know a lot of people, that's the way they'd like to look at trades in terms of whether or not they feel like it works out for them, whether or not they got the best player, and I think you would be getting the best player if you were able to get this deal. So I like it, Jason. I like what you're thinking, and absolutely bolstering your team with a top name player. Let us know how that works out. And if you are a new viewer, welcome to the Fantasy Follow. Glad to have you on tonight, and look forward to seeing you on future live streams as well. All right, let's get right into the content for tonight. It is the Tuesday waiver show. We're going to give you the top 5 waiver wire picks, in our opinion, as we look forward to week 4. Again, you're looking to bolster your rosters every week on the waiver wire, and there are some weeks when your priority is best saved, and there are other weeks when it is best used. And before I do that, I do see a follow-up here. I'll finish this off here with you, Jason, before I get into that content there. Again, this is what we do. For those of you that are new to the stream, we're all about the chats. So even if we're doing other content, we always try to get to your chats. So you say you have Woods, Marvin Jones, Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy, and Rondale Moore as depth. Out of all those players, I have some concerns over Robert Woods this year in terms of his usage in that offense now with Matthew Stafford. It certainly looks like they're not quite looking Woods' way quite as much. Jerry Jeudy obviously out injured. Jacoby Myers has been seeing a good amount of targets there, and Marvin Jones has been, I don't want to say a surprise in Jacksonville, because I think it was kind of expected that he had a good chance in that offense, but certainly there are 3 players there between Jones, Shenault, and Shark that are kind of probably going to be on a rotating basis. Rondale Moore, I think, is a player that still is a flyer to me. He could be much more valuable later on in the season, but right now I think he's still, as a number 4 receiver in that Arizona offense. So, for sure. I mean, if you were to try to make this trade and you didn't get it, I don't think it's going to hurt you, because Evans and Claypool are going to be very startable for you, especially in the next couple of weeks here while Johnson is out. If you can get the deal, then great. You've got a top name receiver, and you're moving right toward, getting those W's and making your way towards those playoffs. So I think either way you go on this one, I think you're going to be okay. But if you can go out and get a deal like this, then absolutely, I don't see any reason not to try for that one. Thank you again, Jason, for the chat. Glad to have you with us. Got another chat here from, I'm going to try to pronounce this one, Sukiya Toem. Best shot I got there. I hope I try to get these names right as best as possible. Let me know if I did. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. If it's not, I apologize, but we try our best here. You say, and welcome, Sukiya. It looks like you might be a new viewer as well. You say Jefferson and Devonta Smith for Cook, 10-man PPR. This one, I don't know. I certainly think to have a Dalvin Cook on your team is great. I don't know if this is, it seems like a lot of value that you're giving up for Cook here. I think Justin Jefferson, and I really like Devonta Smith this year. I know his game, against Dallas wasn't quite what everybody would have hoped. But I like both of these players a lot. To me, I feel like, okay, if you've got a lot of depth at wide receiver, same sort of problem. You say, honestly, it was pretty close. I do agree that it is close. I might say this. If you're going to try to make this deal, I might think it would be worthwhile to try to add a piece to Cook so that it's Dalvin Cook and another piece. Now, it doesn't have to be a top name guy. It doesn't have to be a one. It could be a flex player, somebody that you can swap in there as needed, keep some depth for you as the season goes on and you look towards bye weeks or protecting against injuries. Perhaps there is a receiver on that roster that has Cook that you might be able to get that's not one of their top guys, so it's not like you're going to be taking away one of their starters, but just someone that can add depth. I'm worried if you're giving up this much value between Jefferson and Smith about how much depth remains. Obviously, I don't know all of your players. You guys, as I always say, know your rosters as well as anybody. But to me, I would think, see if you can figure out a way to just keep a little bit of depth. I don't think it's a bad thought to go after Cook here at all. I think it might be worthwhile for you to try to keep a little bit of depth there on your wide receiver side. And you say you have Diggs and Waddle and Robinson at the moment. Diggs, absolutely, you're in good shape. Waddle still a little bit up and down. And Chicago, oh, man, I don't know what's going on there. I know I have Allen Robinson in a couple of spots myself, and it is quite frustrating right now in terms of what's going on with that team. You expect more out of Allen Robinson. I know I talked a little bit about Robert Woods and my concerns before. Similar concerns with Allen Robinson. Of the two, I feel a little bit better about Robinson's ability to turn it around because I think that Robinson's issues are more about the quarterback carousel, and Woods' issues I'm more worried is just not having as much of a connection with Matthew Stafford. And you say, rough. We talked about this a lot last night on the recap show with Chicago, and I got into a nice little rant about Matt Nagy, which was interesting, kind of came out of nowhere, but somebody asked the question on the chat. And I haven't really been a guy in the past that's been really down on Matt Nagy or anything like that. But I feel like the way he's handled this quarterback thing this year has just been not great. Not just the Dalton thing, but talking about this week when Fields was running with the ones in practice. And I heard some reports that he was saying that there was some things that they didn't really realize until he got the chance to play with the ones more. And I'm like, well, listen, this is the guy you drafted. Like, how are you going to, at this point in the season, be saying, you didn't know he could do these things because he didn't get the chance? Well, yeah, why didn't he get the chance? And now you're talking about all this time you've been insistent that it's Dalton starting no matter what. And now that Fields has played and not played well, now you're going to say, well, we might consider Nick Foles too. Well, really? So now you're going to consider Foles. But when it was just Dalton and Fields, it was like, nope, it's absolutely Dalton. Like, this is just not going well there in Chicago. At this point, I can't imagine, if you're a Bears fan, what you're thinking about things. But I got to think Matt Nagy is on the hot seat if you're looking at someone who potentially is the first coach. Now, we never want to see anybody fired, of course. But if you're looking at somebody who's potentially the first coach that might go this year, I have a feeling that Matt Nagy might be that guy at this point. So, it is rough for those of us playing fantasy and for you and for myself as well. The Allen Robinson thing is tough because you want to be able to count on him. And certainly, it affects your thoughts on a trade like this, because if you knew you could count on a guy like Robinson, you're going to trade away two of your top receivers, then you're fine. Now you have concerns because of the fact that things haven't been going well. So, I think your deal, I think you're looking in the right range. But again, I kind of think that if there's, I don't know the rosters, as I said, but if there's some sort of a bench or flex level wide receiver on that team that has Cook, I would think about adding him in there, throwing him in just to have somebody to kind of make yourself feel a little bit better about the fact that, all right, you're losing 2 top receivers. At least you can get somebody back if you need a plug and play or a matchup based play on a week-to-week basis. But by all means, if you can go out and get a guy like Dalvin Cook, and that gives you the best chance to get those wins in your fantasy league, obviously go ahead and go for it. Just want to make sure that you guys are able to get the players to back yourself up in all situations there. So good luck to you. And I hope I said your name right, Sukiya. I believe you probably are a new viewer to the stream. So we welcome you and absolutely look forward to seeing you on future streams as well. Appreciate the chat. All right, before we get on to our content, we will get right into the top 5 waiver wire players at this point, and then we will get back to chats afterwards. So while we're going to the top 5, feel free to drop us those chats, and we will get to them after we go through our waiver wire players. Remind you, the live chat will stay open for the entire show. And that is what we are here for, is to talk fantasy football. We would always rather be talking with you than just be talking to you. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into our content for the night. And we're talking about the top 5 waiver wire players for week 4. So as I started to say before, there are some weeks where, the top players that are available might be worth that number 1 priority if you have it. And there are others where you might save up those priorities and hope to build them up so that when there's a week, that's really in a very obvious spot that you have that to use. I feel like this is that week. And that guy is Chuba Hubbard for the Carolina Panthers. With Christian McCaffrey now out to injury, it does sound like it's possibly a 2-week injury. You never know how that works out, but we know, of course, last year McCaffrey, hopefully was going to be coming back and then never did. So if that 2 becomes more than 2, then even more of a benefit to you. If you can go out and pick up a guy like Chuba Hubbard in your league, it's going to take your number 1 priority. I would be surprised if anybody that has the number 1 does not use it. They should be at this point. Whether or not they need a running back or not to put a piece like this in your lineup, even if you're just going to try to shop him for a trade, there's so much value in adding a player like this at this point, a rookie who could have some very decent return there while McCaffrey is out. Hubbard currently rostered in 25% of all leagues. This last game, when McCaffrey went out to injury, Hubbard 11 rushes, 52 yards, also 3 catches on 5 targets for 27 yards. It's not a great run of games coming up for Hubbard. It's not like it's super great matchups. Playing Dallas this week, currently giving up the 26th. So that is the 7th fewest fantasy points to the running back spot. But again, playing Dallas, there are opportunities there. Philadelphia the next week, number 12. If it is 2 weeks, they're giving up the 12th most fantasy points to the running back spot. So if it's just limited to those 2 weeks, it's okay. You feel pretty good probably about starting this guy over a lot of other players at this point. We got Minnesota and the Giants in the following games after that, who are 2 middle-of-the-road matchups as well. So we'll see how that works out. But I think absolutely, if you have the number 1 priority, I think this is a guy that's absolutely worthwhile to get on your roster and just kind of see how things work out. I know I've made that opportunity in many of my leagues as well. So number 1 on the waiver wire this week for week 4, I got Chuba Hubbard. Number 2 is Emmanuel Sanders out of Buffalo. Familiar name to everybody that plays fantasy. Not a guy that was rostered a lot in drafts this year. Currently rostered in 26% of all leagues. That's stats from Yahoo is where I get those stats, just so you're aware in case you're not playing on that platform. But I feel that's probably one of the most popular platforms where people are playing. This past week, a big week for Sanders. 26.4 fantasy points for the Bills. 6 targets, 5 catches, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns against the Washington football team. The run of games for Sanders is so-so. Playing Houston this week. Houston currently giving up the 9th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. That's probably more a game script thing than anything else. Kansas City the next week giving up the 8th most, and then Tennessee at number 3. So some decent games ahead for Sanders. In terms of how Sanders' production has been so far this season, in the first 3 weeks, targets 8, 6, and 6. Fantasy points 9, 7, and 26. So we know Buffalo is a heavy pass volume offense, so you would expect that to continue. Obviously, you're not going to expect Sanders to be the leader in that offense every week, ahead of Diggs or even ahead of a guy like Cole Beasley. But he was this week, kind of just proving that he does have some value there. And it's worth a shot to get that guy on your roster and kind of figure out where it goes, moving forward from this point in the season. So I think Emmanuel Sanders definitely worthy of the number 2 spot on the top 5 this week in terms of waiver wire players. Number 3, this is an interesting name here, Tim Patrick, a player that we heard about a lot on last year's waiver wires. The situation in Denver right now is now you've also lost KJ Hamler in addition to all of their other injury issues. They've had their Hamler out for the season at this point. So Tim Patrick, who already had decent amount of work in that offense, you would expect to see an uptick even from what he had been doing. Patrick currently rostered in 22% of all leagues. This last week against the Jets, 5 targets, 5 catches, 98 yards. Obviously not a close game. So, you obviously would think that there's even more potential for more work in games where Denver does not have that positive game script working for them. Past 3 games for Patrick, targets 4, 4, and 5. So not a ton, but again, you expect that to increase. However, fantasy points in the first 3, 14, 13, and 15 in a PPR format. So he's already been producing. You would expect the volume to increase for Tim Patrick. I think this is, I don't want to call this a sneaky pickup, but I think it could be a sneaky pickup to some people just because, Tim Patrick doesn't necessarily have the name value of an Emmanuel Sanders, but I think certainly warranted to be in that top 5 at this point. And some decent matchups coming up, a couple of middle-of-the-road matchups. Next 4 games for Denver is Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, and Cleveland. The best of all those matchups is the second one against Pittsburgh, currently giving up the 6th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So I think that there is some potential there with that Denver offense and with the increased volume for Tim Patrick to be able to return some nice value to your team off the waiver wire this week. At number 4, I've got Peyton Barber from the Las Vegas Raiders. This pickup certainly has a lot to do with Josh Jacobs and his health. If Jacobs continues to be injured, we saw Barber step in this week and have a very nice game against Miami. That was 23 rushes for 111 yards with a touchdown. Also had 3 catches on 5 targets for 31. Obviously, Kenyon Drake is probably still going to be worked into that rotation there. Perhaps we saw Barber get a little bit more of that work because of Drake's not having such a great game this week, we'll say. But we heard the Raiders talk about it before that if Jacobs were to miss time, they didn't necessarily expect to just move Drake into that role. They thought it was going to be Barber, and so far that is playing out that way. So if you have the ability and the depth on your bench to add a player that could return some value for you, even if you are not a Josh Jacobs person that you have him on your roster, this guy has already shown that he is capable of putting up numbers at this point this season. His run of games, Chargers, Chicago, Denver, Philadelphia. No super great matchups there. Chargers 11th in terms of fantasy points to running backs. Chicago, middle of the road. Denver, pretty low. And then Philadelphia right around 10th right now. So Peyton Barber, I think it's difficult to find running backs that are worthy of adding value to your team. So anytime there is one that can do what Peyton Barber did last week, I think it's worthy of putting them in the top 5 pickups on the waiver wire this week. Sometimes those pickups work out for you. Sometimes you just end up cutting them. But this is a guy that could return value, and especially if Josh Jacobs continues to be hurt, I think definitely worthy to take a look at this guy. Currently only rostered in 7% of all leagues. So most likely he is available for you in your leagues. Again, when I talk about these top 5 waiver wire players, I'm only considering players that are currently rostered in less than 50% of all leagues. So there certainly might be some players on your waiver wire that are still available that might not necessarily fit that category, and that affects what you do. So keep an eye for that. But these are the players that we talk about in terms of who is rostered in less than 50%. Talking about a tight end here, especially if you're streaming tight ends, and of course it's very difficult to find good production at the tight end spot. Got Dalton Schultz at number 5 on the waiver wire list this week. Currently rostered in only 2% of all leagues. There are a couple tight ends that I considered as making a part of this top 5 for this week. Dalton Schultz was kind of the one that won out against Philadelphia this last game. 7 targets, 6 catches. I believe I wrote down 81 yards, 2 touchdowns. And his workload in the first 3 games in terms of targets, a little bit up and down, 6, 2, and 7. And in terms of fantasy points, 11, 4, and then, of course, 26. He actually is tight end 5 overall for the season right now. So, again, if you are a person who is streaming tight ends or is having a difficult time finding the consistent production that you want at that spot, certainly this is a player worth looking at. 2 out of 3 weeks with over 10 fantasy points for a tight end who is not considered one of the top guys is certainly worthy of taking a look at this point. So Dalton Schultz, number 5 on this list. Here are the top 5 in order. Chuba Hubbard, number 1, rostered in 25% of all leagues. Emmanuel Sanders, a guy that we know very well for Buffalo now, 26% of all leagues after a very nice game this past week. Tim Patrick, expecting an uptick in volume here for the Broncos, 22%. Peyton Barber for the Raiders, currently rostered at 7% of all leagues. And Dalton Schultz for the Cowboys at 2%. That is our top 5 for this week. We do have some bonus ads to go through with you as well. But before we do that, we will get back to the chat and we will go through some of these chats and then we will hit up those bonus ads a little bit later on. So let's get back into the chat. Again, First one here from DJ Vic. Welcome, DJ Vic. Glad to have you on the stream here. And before I answer your question, let's just put up the reminder for everybody else that the chat will be open. We've got this pinned in your chat there on YouTube. Open the entire show. We're here for your questions, so feel free, even if we are talking about other stuff, drop us a chat, and we will get to these. That's obviously what we like to do the best. So we'll get right into these now. DJ Vic, you say what's up. I say what's up, DJ Vic. If you are a new viewer, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you here. You say, oh, this is a good start to this chat right away. Traded Allen Robinson for A.J. Brown. Any trade you can get for Allen Robinson right now is a good deal, in my opinion. Full PPR, you're 3-0. You like A.J. better rest of season. Oh, A.J. Brown, I think I don't know if you, when I read that first, I thought you were saying Antonio Brown. But yes, A.J. Brown absolutely, to me, is a much better value than Allen Robinson. Hopefully he gets healthy soon. That's the only issue here is this going to be a lingering injury for A.J. Brown? But at this point, with the issues in Chicago and as much trouble with they're having at the quarterback spot, I would take that chance. Also, I don't fault you at all for making this trade and taking that chance on the injury concern. To me, Allen Robinson at this point, you have to it's very difficult to continue to start him given the situation of what's going on there. So obviously, we hope that things turn around in that offense. But yes, I think this is a great deal for you. I would love to be able to go out and make this deal myself in some of my leagues because I have Robinson in a couple of different spots myself. And absolutely, I would prefer to have A.J. Brown. I think you're going to, rest of season, you're going to see much better return out of A.J. Obviously, the Tennessee offense off to a slow start. You have to think that improves. But two really good matchups. Hopefully, Brown can get back healthy. The Jets and Jacksonville each of the next 2 weeks for Tennessee. So this is a get-right stretch for the Titans, and for sure, Derrick Henry's going to probably get a lot of that. But, of course, players that we are concerned about right now, Julio, A.J. Brown, and Ryan Tannehill, all of which we expected more out of and are off to slow starts. So this is a little get-right stretch for the Titans offense to see if they can kind of turn things around there. And, Vic, you say thanks, and I say no. Thank you. As always, thank all of you guys for being on the stream. You guys make the shows. With your chats. And I will also say this, for those of you guys that are new on the stream tonight, if you enjoy what we're doing here, feel free to drop us a like or hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. All those likes and those subscribes, they certainly help out the channel a ton. But also we want to make sure that you guys are able to get those notifications whenever we have new content. We are very close to our first goal of 100 subscribers. I think we were at 95 starting the show, so it's very possible that we might even hit that 100 number tonight. If we do that, we do thank you already for being a part of our channel as we start to continue to grow this season. Certainly that has been one of our first goals, is hitting that 100 mark, and we are very close. So we appreciate all of you guys that are regulars that have been with us, and also all of you guys that are new viewers. Glad to have you, and certainly look forward to having you back on future streams as well. Got another chat here from Drew Charlton. Again, I try to get these names right. I do my best. Charlton. That's what it looks like to me. I hope I'm getting that right. Tell me, Drew, if I got that right. Also, looks like you might be a new viewer, Drew, so welcome to the stream. You say, would this be a good trade? Deebo Samuel and Corey Davis for Jonathan Taylor, non-PPR. I like what you're thinking here because this is a buy low situation. For those people that have Jonathan Taylor on their rosters now, they are worried. I can say that because I am one of them. And the problem here is that if you are in a situation where you kind of wish you could get away from Taylor at this point, it's pretty difficult to get the value back if you are making somebody an offer for Taylor that you feel like you would deserve based on where you drafted him. So you're kind of stuck in a situation where, if you really don't want to have Taylor on your roster anymore, you almost have to wait for somebody to make you an offer that might be decent in terms of what you can get back. And here's the situation that you're in, Drew. You're that player that's going to be able to make that offer. So Deebo has had a great start to the year. I think he's going to return good value for the rest of the season. And Corey Davis is a player that could absolutely continue to get better. Hopefully the Jets offense can score more than 0 in the future, because that's very difficult for fantasy purposes if you're going 0. But we'll see what happens there. For sure, you would think that Corey Davis probably is in line to be the number one guy in that offense in terms of pass catchers. So is that enough value for you to get that Jonathan Taylor from that other person in your league? Perhaps. I don't know the rosters, but perhaps this is a player that needs depth at the wide receiver spot, or they're shaky on the players that they have. And these couple of players, Samuel and Davis, can really help them. If they have depth at running back, they might be willing to get rid of Taylor and just kind of move on at this point. I can certainly see where that sentiment would be out there. As I said, I kind of feel the same way because I have Taylor in a few spots, and it's frustrating to have drafted a player that high and not see the return that you need to go out there and win weeks in your fantasy leagues. So I think this is absolutely worth a shot for you, Drew, to try to get that. You never know what's going to happen when you make a trade offer. Sometimes you get them. Sometimes they say no. If you're playing with players in your league who are really doing their homework, they might offer you a counter offer back. Well, let's say that they say, I'm willing to give up Taylor, but I want something else. Gives you the option to say, okay, well, can I consider a different piece or whatnot? Yeah, I absolutely think, Drew, that you can go out and make this offer on a buy low. You're obviously hoping that Taylor turns it around. A lot of us are. But if it's non-PPR, this isn't Taylor's favorite because obviously Nyheim Hines is the guy that's going to be the pass catcher. You don't expect Taylor's workload to be dependent on pass catching there in Indianapolis. I still do feel like the Colts are a strong run team. I feel like they historically in the past few seasons have had good offensive line play. There's been a lot of turmoil right now at the quarterback spot in terms of Carson Wentz and his injuries. So you can understand the slow start and the inconsistent production that we've seen there. If you are able to get a deal like this, you are banking on that. Things will turn around in that offense. And certainly Jonathan Taylor is one of their main, if not their main guys in that offense, if they can get it to turn around. So I think this is a very good buy low situation for you, Drew. And if you have depth at your wide receiver spot and you can safely ship away, which I'm sure you do, otherwise you wouldn't be making this offer, you can safely ship away these guys and get a Jonathan Taylor. I think he can certainly bolster your roster. So, Drew, yes, I would go ahead and give this an opportunity and see what you get back. And if the guy that you're trying to make that trade with doesn't necessarily want to make this without some changes, then you have the option to consider the changes that he offers. So nothing wrong with making those offers and seeing what happens. And if you can get a Jonathan Taylor, who is you would consider to be a top guy, and he has the opportunity to kind of turn around this season, then that is going to benefit your team down the line. So I thank you, Drew, for the chat. I hope I got your last name right. Glad to have you on the stream. And by all means, stop back and see us again. Let us know if this trade worked out for you and how you did moving forward. So glad to have you. Thank you for the chat, Drew. And absolutely want to remind everybody that the live chat remains open for the rest of the show. We do have this pinned at the top of your chat there just to let you know, even if we are going through other content, feel free to drop us a chat, and we will go ahead and get to those fantasy football questions all show long. All right, let's get back to the waiver wire side of things here, and we will go ahead and bring you our bonus ads. We'll remind you of who our top 5 waiver wire players were already that we talked about for this week. Chuba Hubbard at number 1 for the Panthers, Emmanuel Sanders for the Bills, Tim Patrick for the Broncos, Peyton Barber for the Raiders, and Dalton Schultz for the Dallas Cowboys. Those are the top 5 players, but we do have some bonus additions also to talk about tonight. We don't want to limit it to just 5. I want to talk about other players who were just outside of our top 5, but still might be worthy of consideration on your waiver wire this week. And we start out with a guy that I feel like every week, like last season, the same thing, like Jalen Rhaegar, for some reason, continues to be a guy that I select to somehow be a part of this waiver wire discussion. Perhaps I'm a little higher on him than some other people have been. But again, you're talking about a second-year player with a young quarterback. I think there's a lot of upside to be had here. Does he reach that potential this year? Who knows? Devonta Smith, to me, is the main guy, but Rhaegar could be considered to be right there, probably next in line. Currently rostered in 24% of all leagues for the Eagles. This last game against Dallas, 8 targets for Rhaegar, which is decent work in the offense there. 5 catches, just 53 yards. Didn't have a touchdown, so obviously that would help his production. But if you look at the last 3 weeks for Rhaegar in terms of targets, it was 6, 5, and 8, so pretty consistent there. And in terms of fantasy points scored, it was 17, 3, and 10. A little bit more up and down, but obviously 2 out of 3 weeks in the double digits and reasonably consistent amount of volume there for Rhaegar. The run of games, they've got a nice matchup this week in terms of fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver spot, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs, currently allowing the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Then they got Carolina, Tampa Bay, and Las Vegas. Carolina a little bit towards the bottom, but Tampa right now sitting at number 1, and then Vegas right in the middle. So some potential there in terms of Jalen Rhaegar if you're looking for a guy. You know, some of these guys that we have on the bonus list, they may not necessarily cost you your waiver priority. You might not need to put a claim in on these guys. You could very potentially just sit back and let your number build up and then see if that guy is still available and get him for free, which I think Jalen Rhaegar is probably a player that does fall into that category, as are most of the guys who I put in the bonus section of the waiver wire players. So Jalen Rhaegar, guy, go out there and look and see if he's in your league, and perhaps a player to stash on your bench and just kind of see how it goes for the rest of the season. Here's another guy. We've heard of this guy, A.J. Green. I hesitate to actually put A.J. Green this high. To me, this is a player that if you're going to pick him up off the waiver wire, it's a little bit more about name value and just wanting to see if he perhaps does get things going. I don't necessarily expect his involvement in this offense to be drastic all year long. I don't think it's necessarily going to be as consistent. I think that, for sure DeAndre Hopkins and, to me, Christian Kirk is probably going to be ahead of A.J. Green for most of the season. And, of course, Rondo Moore, the rookie, who a lot of players are really high on. All of that impacts A.J. Green, currently rostered in 15% of all leagues. Nonetheless, nice game this last week for Green, 5 catches, 6 targets. Of course, Hopkins was banged up, and it wasn't a tough matchup. He did have 112 yards against Jacksonville. So difficult to say whether or not all of those circumstances created the better game for Green, or if you start to see more consistent production from him throughout the season. He has had 6 targets in all 3 games this year. In terms of fantasy points, it was 5 in week 1, 13 in week 2, and 16 in week 3, of course, in a PPR scoring format. So not awful. It's a player that you might want to keep an eye on and stash away on your bench to see if things continue to go well and can perhaps benefit your team. And if not, you cut them and you move on. It's pretty simple. That's how the waiver wire goes. The run of games for the Arizona Cardinals, they've got the Rams, the 49ers, Cleveland, and Houston. None of those matchups are fantastic. And also, another one of the reasons why he didn't crack that top 5. The Rams, the best of all those matchups, and they are only 16th in terms of fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So not a lot of great matchups in line for A.J. Green right now. Another factor that might make it tough for him to continue to have that consistent production. But nonetheless, a player you can take a look at and consider as a waiver wire pickup here for week 4. All right, a couple of other players here I've got as bonus players. For the Buffalo Bills, Dawson Knox at the tight end position, currently rostered in 9% of all leagues. Again, the tight end spot is awful difficult, so it's never a bad idea to have a couple of extra guys to keep an eye on here should you need to try to look to somebody else on a streaming basis at your tight end spot. Knox this past week against Washington, 5 targets, 4 catches, I believe it says 49 yards that I wrote down with a touchdown. And the production that he's had in the first 3 weeks in terms of targets, 4, 3, and 5. So right about what you would expect for a tight end. And then fantasy points, 8, 10, and 15. So not awful. The run of games, a decent little run playing Houston this week. Houston is currently giving up the 4th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. And then Kansas City at 12. So certainly in the top half. Tennessee is actually last right now, and then they have a bye. So a couple of decent games where you can keep an eye on Dawson Knox and see what kind of production he continues to return. And then another guy in that same situation, although perhaps not as consistent right now, but certainly with a big game this past week, was Tyler Conklin from the Minnesota Vikings. Certainly Irv Smith being out there gives some opportunity for a guy like Conklin to step in. Currently only rostered in 4% of all leagues. But this last game against Seattle, he did see 8 targets, 7 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. And over the first 3 games, his targets have been 4, 4, and 8. So a nice game this last week, but the other ones were kind of in line with what you would expect. And fantasy points was 8, 4, and then 20 this past week. So certainly, is this a guy that's continuing to kind of evolve in that offense there? Quite possibly. Someone to take a look at. And the next 4 matchups for the Vikings are Cleveland, Detroit, Carolina, and then a bye week. Cleveland currently this week giving up the 20th, so that is the 13th fewest fantasy points to the tight end spot. So nothing great there in terms of the matchup. The week after that is Detroit giving up the 9th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. And then Carolina quite low, 28, so that's 5th fewest. So certainly, not great matchups there for Conklin, but a player that you could take a look at and see if he could possibly impact your lineup down the road. All right, so those are the bonus ads that we have. In addition to our top 5 bonus players to keep an eye on and take a look at this week, Jalen Rhaegar from the Eagles, rostered in 24% of all leagues. A.J. Green from the Cardinals in 15% of all leagues. Dawson Knox from the Buffalo Bills, 9% of all leagues, and Tyler Conklin from the Minnesota Vikings, 4%. A couple of tight ends there to kind of give you some players to look at if you are streaming tight ends. Those are our bonus players in the waiver wire department for this week. All right, let's go ahead and let me see if there are any chats. I will put up the reminder about the chat is open for the entire show. We do have that pinned up on your chat area there. And we definitely want to make you know, let you know that that chat is open for the remainder of the show. If you have fantasy football questions, feel free to jump in and give us those chats. And I do see another chat here from Bill Romanowski. Bill, you say hello. And what's up, Bill? Glad to have you on the stream. Good opportunity, since you're here, Bill, to let everybody know to keep an eye out for this week's 6 picks game and the current leaderboard in 6 picks. Look at that. Bill Romanowski still holding his own in third place there. Dropped a little bit. He was the week 1 leader. Chris Noriega currently has the top spot. And Vance go in second place. Again, the 6 picks game. It's a weekly game that you will see. You just look for a video released from us. It has 6 fantasy matchups that occur within the same games. Just gives you the opportunity to play along, pick the winners based on who you think will have the better day in fantasy scoring. Pretty simple. These are the quick rules. But on that video, when you see it released, it is not out yet for this week, but hopefully it will be out very soon. You're just going to pick your winners in the comments section on that video. That must be on that video in order for us to count them using PPR scoring. Just say, hey, I think Mark Andrews is going to outscore TJ Hawkinson this week because that was the matchup we had, and Bill was actually the only one that picked that one right. So good job on that one, Bill. PPR scoring, we keep those standings all season long, and we do keep those picks open until 1 o'clock on Sunday so that you can go ahead and make those picks. And again, it's just look for the thumbnail, 6 picks. This was the thumbnail that we used for week 2. So when we have the video for week 4 available, that will hopefully be very soon, and we'll give you the opportunity to get in on our new game. So let me get Bill back in here. If you're still in the chat here, Bill, tell me what's going on with your fantasy team this year. How are you doing? I know you said you were off to a little bit of a rough start. As I always say, our most famous viewer, NFL legend Bill Romanowski. Always glad to have you on the stream. Let us know. Tell me how your season's going so far, if you're starting to turn things around. I know it's been a little bit of a tough go for all of us. I'm in the same boat here at this point with the start of the season. All right, let's go ahead and get a quick reminder here in terms of let me see where we're at here. Back up to this is our original content from the night. Again, the top 5 waiver wire players for week 4. We'll remind you on those: Chuba Hubbard in the number 1 spot, Emmanuel Sanders at number 2, Tim Patrick at number 3 for the Broncos, Peyton Barber for the Raiders at number 4, and Dalton Schultz. And you see the amounts that they are rostered. Again, when we talk about the top 5 players here, we only consider players who are currently rostered in less than 50% of all leagues in order to make those lists. Those are the players that we have as the top players to target this week. And then our bonus ads that we just went through, Jalen Rhaegar from the Eagles, 24%, AJ Green from the Cardinals at 15%, Dawson Knox at 9, tight ends there at the bottom of your list there, and Tyler Conklin in 4. Players to keep an eye on, and I know we talked about this a little bit on last night's stream. Most of you that are, if you're out there doing your homework this much that you're watching the streams like this on YouTube, most of you probably know this, but I did offer this up last night as a piece of information that some players may not be aware of. If you're playing in a league that has IR spots, and you have a player on in your IR spot, even if they are just out on a week-to-week basis, let's say like a player like Deontay Johnson was last week, make your waiver claims early. And then if you don't decide to use them by the time it gets to Tuesday night, you can just cancel them. But the big thing is on Yahoo is once those designations change, like right now, Deontay Johnson is considered questionable. If you make your waiver claim on Monday before the designation changes, it doesn't matter if he's considered questionable. He can still stay in your IR spot, and you'll get that claim as long as it was submitted early enough. If you wait until Tuesday to submit that change, to submit that claim once the designation has changed, then you're going to have to move him off your IR and cut somebody. You could potentially have a spot there to use for free if you make those claims early enough. And it's just a little bit of a kind of a looking ahead deal that kind of gets you a small edge over your competition. if you make those claims on Monday, then it doesn't matter anymore. You can continue to leave that player in your IR spot, and gives you all sorts of options that way. If you want to decide on who to cut later, if you want to think about streaming a defense and cutting your defense later on and not using a priority on that, so even a 2-for-1 type trade that opens up a spot, there are all sorts of options available to you if you play it that way. Perhaps you don't go that way. Perhaps you still end up making that cut, but at least it gives you the opportunity to have some choices down the road. So again, I do like to remind players like that. I know most of you probably, I do figure that most players play on Yahoo. And again, that is kind of the little trick that you can use to kind of give yourself more options as the week goes on. You have the ability to keep a player on IR, if you're not going to start him, just continue to keep him there. And, is that the spirit of the IR? I don't know if it's necessarily the spirit, but it is what you're allowed to do. So everybody has that opportunity. So as long as you have it, you might as well use it to your advantage. So I do like to offer that as a little bit of a suggestion there for everybody to help you out as you make those waiver claims. Bill Romanowski back in the chat says you are 2-1 fantasy. Julio Jones could play better. Waiver priority is number 3. I'm going to be interested to see what happens with Julio this week. When A.J. Brown went out of this game this last week, Julio did not necessarily turn in what I thought that he would. And I think, let me see if I still have this information from last night's stream. I have to set up something real quick here to get this to work out for us. When Julio or when AJ went out, you would have thought that meant that Julio would be able to step in. Oh, of course, I didn't mean to do that. Well, that's as all of you know, this is live, and sometimes things don't happen exactly how we want them to. But that was one of those cases. If we look back, we took a look at the Week 1 recap. Of course, this is not Monday post game. This is Tuesday, Waiver Tuesday. Okay, great. This is going well. See, this is what happens when you start to throw in stuff that you didn't anticipate using. Here is the recap from Indianapolis and Tennessee. Julio Jones just 7-7, in the absence of A.J. Brown is not really what you would have expected there. And again, I don't have any idea how to say Nick's name other than Westbrook. Didn't make an attempt last night at his name, and I'm not going to make an attempt at it tonight either. So this is kind of curious in terms of, like I said, we've got a get-right situation for Tennessee with the Jets and then Jacksonville to kind of have a little bit better idea of how that offense turns out for Tennessee. Obviously, it hasn't gone as great as we would have hoped at this point. So Julio is a player to keep an eye on right now and try to understand what's going to happen in that offense there for Tennessee. So I do agree with you, Bill, there that certainly is not exactly what you would have expected when you drafted Julio to start the season. We will see what happens there. You do say I'm going to hit your follow-ups first. I do see the other chat there. We'll get to that next. Bill Romanowski, back to your follow-ups. T.Y. Hilton on IR, even though not a huge fan. Kind of agree there. Very boom or bust. And starters are Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, David Montgomery, and not Ty Montgomery, of course, Tyreek Hill, Adam Thielen, Julio, Koo, Youngo Koo, I believe, as a kicker, and Tampa Bay. Last night on the stream, the recap stream, we talked a lot about Tampa Bay's defense. They have a great run of games coming up right now. So you're not in the situation where you need to be worried about streaming a defense at this point because Tampa Bay has a very nice run. You would expect them to start to turn in some nice production there. But 2-1 is a good start. I would take that in many of my leagues right now because I'm not necessarily in as good of a situation. It's sometimes, losing games by a couple of points is not a lot of fun. But listen, this is why we all play fantasy football. So you got to take the wins with the losses. You move on, and you do the best that you can. Again, waiver wire night is the time to bolster your team, and we're all in that same situation, including me. So I hope you guys all are able to go out there and get players that you can help bolster your roster. All right, we got a chat from Fantasy Football Stats Guy. Looks like you might be new to the stream, so welcome. I like the name a lot, Fantasy Football Stats Guy. You are going to ask which side wins, Thielen for Woods and Chuba. Thielen absolutely wins that, in my opinion, partly because I am very concerned with Robert Woods this year in terms of what's going on with that offense there in LA. It does not seem that Woods has the same sort of connection with Matthew Stafford that Cooper Kupp certainly has. But not only that, we've seen a lot of work from Van Jefferson. And, of course, Deshaun Jackson had a very nice game. Robert Woods is a guy that you might expect to give you some nice, consistent production, but right now it's not there. So if you have Robert Woods, I can say that you are probably someone who is looking to see if you can get him off of your roster at this point. I can say that because I feel the same way. I have him in a couple of spots this year. And Chuba is going to be productive, most likely for you, but it's not a long-term deal. You, at least for all those people who roster Christian McCaffrey, hope that it doesn't go that way. It looks like 2 weeks is what they're talking about for McCaffrey. Perhaps it's a little bit more than that if they want to continue to let him get better and they continue to win games, especially if they're winning games without him. I think Chuba is going to return some nice value, but it's not going to be a long-term deal. So if you can turn a Robert Woods and a Chuba Hubbard into Adam Thielen, I think that absolutely is a win for you. I think that Thielen is going to be he's one of those players who is, I don't want to say under the radar, but undervalued probably in terms of what he turns out. It's a very nice start to the year. Justin Jefferson gets the spotlight there in Minnesota. I think Adam Thielen probably will continue to produce value there. So I absolutely think that the Thielen side of that deal is the better side. And a lot of times in trades, you're looking, a lot of people want to grade trades by who gets the better player or the best player in the deal. And I think that absolutely is Adam Thielen. You are getting an upgrade on Robert Woods, and you're really only sacrificing a couple of weeks from Chuba. So, yes, I think that is a great opportunity for you, fantasy football stats guy. If you are the one that is trying to get Thielen, then I absolutely think that you have a good shot there. If you are on the other side of that where you are thinking about trading him away, then I would say perhaps consider holding on to that guy over those other two guys because I don't, obviously you're taking Woods would be a buy low if you're trying to trade for him. Perhaps you're a little bit more confident in his production than me at this point. But yeah, I think I like the Thielen side of that one, fantasy football stats guy. And you say, here's your follow-up. You say you have Thielen. So yeah, I think that you're getting back. To me, you're getting back someone who you just don't know if they're going to turn it around at this point. It would be nice to have at least seen a nice week from Woods at this point to feel more comfortable, but we haven't. So it's a big question mark. And then in terms of Chuba, like I said, it's only a couple of week thing. So yes, you're going to be good for a couple of weeks, but after that, Thielen is a long-term. You expect, barring, of course, we never want to see anybody get injured, but barring any injury and Thielen stays healthy, you're looking at a year's worth of production. If it continues at this pace, you're going to be in really good shape. Another follow-up here. Would you move A-Rob for Woods and Chuba? RB2 situation is hurting. Yes, I would much rather like to do this than getting rid of Thielen because right now Allen Robinson and Robert Woods are right about the same point. Like you're worried about both of them at this point. So what you're potentially losing from your roster, losing Robinson hurts you a lot less to me than losing Thielen does at this point. Even though you probably drafted Allen Robinson higher, that was the draft. And how's it going right now? Because the Chicago quarterback situation is awful, and that has a lot to do with it. Yes, I like this. I like this idea better if you could swing that deal. And again, the person that has Woods probably is wanting to get rid of Woods just as much as you might be wanting to get rid of Robinson at this time. So you got a good chance to swing this deal on both sides, I think. And picking up Chuba, that person they probably didn't even draft Chuba. Perhaps they did. But if they're willing to get rid of him, that means they don't have McCaffrey, which means they probably didn't draft him in the first place. They probably just picked him up off the waiver wire. And so for that person, a waiver wire pickup, giving them the opportunity to get rid of a guy that they might be worried about right now is appealing. And so, yeah, I think this is a better shot for you to try to work this way. Keep your Thielen and see if you can get that A-Rob. And then by all means, when you make that offer, the person that you make the offer to, they might come back with a counter offer. And that gives you the opportunity to kind of evaluate, do you like the counter offer that they gave you, or do you just want to say no and move on? But yeah, I like going this way much better. Hope that works out for you, fantasy football stats guy. And again, if you are new to the stream, glad to have you here, and certainly look forward to seeing you on future streams as well. All right, let me roll back up here. Again, as I always say with these chats, sometimes I jump around and I hit follow-ups while I'm talking about one specific person's chat. When I scroll back up, I'm looking back through a whole bunch of other chats on my service here. So if I miss somebody, it's not on purpose. Just if I miss somebody, just say, hey, you missed mine, and I'll go back and get it. I absolutely don't mean to do it on purpose. So I'm scrolling back up here to see where we are, and hopefully I do not do that. But if I do, just please let me know, and I will go back and hit whoever that I did miss. I believe up next is back to Drew Charlton. Welcome back, Drew, again. You asked, what tight end can I get for trading Cortland Sutton and Jared Cook PPR? Well, let me do this on my other screen here. Let me call up let's take a look at the current rundown of tight ends in terms of what they've done all season long. As we already talked about, there are a couple of tight ends on the waiver wire list this week that you could pick up and give yourself a shot without having to trade anybody away. So let's talk about that first, Drew, because these are options that might be helpful to your team. I'm going to put up the information from earlier. These are guys that I have either as top 5 players this week or as bonus ads off of the waiver wire. So the first guy I want to put up and tell you about is Dalton Schultz, currently rostered in only 2% of all leagues. Dalton Schultz is currently the overall tight end 5 for the year. He's ahead of George Kittle. He's ahead of Logan Thomas. He's ahead of Mark Andrews, ahead of Noah Fant, ahead of Tyler Higbee. This is a guy that's not going to cost you anybody in a trade. And so these are options that might be, we'll talk about the trade part of that in a minute, but these are other options that I wanted to throw out there first. Another guy out there, this was a bonus name that we used this week, was Dawson Knox from the Bills. Again, Dawson Knox currently the tight end 8, ahead of guys like Andrews and Fant. And then you've got Tyler Conklin from the Vikings, currently tight end 10. So here are some names. It's early in the season. Again, the tight end spot is difficult to work with, but these are names that are on the radar to take a look at, and they won't cost you anything in terms of a trade. The reason why I say that is because, to me, there is some potential here in Jared Cook. It hasn't been awesome to start the year, but I think the offense in LA means that there is the ability that Cook could kind of have some nice value here and there. Again, it's tough at the tight end spot. If you're talking about making this trade here, I certainly think Cortland Sutton has some value, and throwing in Cook, you've got to get back enough from that to make it worth your while here to do this, especially given the fact that there are a couple of tight ends out there for free on the waiver wire. So you're not going to probably get a top 5 guy. You know, the big 5 tight end names, you know, Kelsey, if you include Gronk, 6, but Kelsey, Hawkinson, Waller, Kittle, and Andrews, probably the only of those players you might be able to think about is Andrews, and he's probably 5th to me. Perhaps somebody is unhappy with Hawkinson's production this last game, but he's off to a pretty good start, and I think he's going to continue to produce in that offense in Detroit. So to me, those guys are out of the question. That puts you in the range of a guy like a Tyler Higbee from the Rams, who I think has a decent shot to have consistent production the entire season. A guy like a Logan Thomas for the Washington football team, I think, is in that area. Dallas Goedert, I don't know that there's enough production there to consider that. Perhaps somebody is very concerned with Kyle Pitts, who drafted him high and wants to get away from him. I don't think there are a lot of names that are worthwhile. Again, Jared Cook right now is tight end 21. So it's not like there's a lot of guys above him that have enough value to make it worthwhile for trading. Some of these guys I just don't think is enough. Like Zach Ertz, you're not going to trade for. You're not going to trade for Austin Hooper. There are only a couple of guys. Again, I think it's Andrews and Hawkinson are probably the bottom couple players of the top range of tight ends that you could get. But I think you're looking at a Higbee, you're looking at a Fant, someone in that range that you might be able to make that deal. And certainly if you're trading a Sutton for the Denver Broncos, you know, perhaps a Noah Fant is a player in that range that you're kind of working with the same team that you might be able to swing that. So those are the kind of players that I would look at in that range. Of course, it never hurts to give it a shot if you want to try for an Andrews or something like that, or that's a higher up tight end. I just don't know that it's how much value that the other person in your league is going to be feeling like they're getting in terms of that. It's tough with tight ends. It's just every year it's like this. So those are the players I would think about, Drew. But again, take a look at your waiver wire before you make those offers. And especially take a look at do a little bit of homework on the production that you've seen from a guy like Schultz or a guy like Knox. And perhaps you might feel like, hey, you might be able to still kind of get what you're looking for here. It might not be the name, but if the production is there, then so be it. I would take a look at that as well as you consider all those options, Drew. Again, as we always say here, whichever guys you go with there, hope they crush it for you and keep on getting those W's. Vansco is here. Welcome back, Vansco. You say you bought low on Robert Woods. Vansco, one of our regulars, traded Pittman and Drake. Drake was a throwaway. I absolutely would agree with that. Robert Woods for Pittman and Drake, I think, is a very good deal for you. Despite the difficulties that Woods has had so far, again, it's a buy low, as you said. If he turns it around, then great. You haven't lost that much, really. If he doesn't, I'm assuming that Michael Pittman is not really starting on your roster right now. And Robert Woods, if he starts to play well, could be a starter. So that's the type of trade that we're looking for. A buy low situation, you've done well there. think the production will come. He's always on the field, and I know that you are a Rams guy there as well, Vansco, so you know that as well as anybody does there. So, yeah, I think you've done well in that trade for yourself and for your team. Before we get on to the rest of the chats, since you're here, Vansco, it gives me another opportunity to put up the current standings in the 6 picks game. Vansco currently in second place. Keep an eye out for the 6 picks video that will be out very soon this week. It's a weekly game where you're able to go in there and make those picks and play against the other players that are on that video. Just all you got to do is leave your picks in the comment section on that video. If you go back and watch one of the previous week's videos that are currently up there now, you'll kind of see how it works. You're basically taking a look at 6 matchups each week. You just make your picks and try to get your name on that leaderboard, as these guys have done so far. And we see both Vansco and Bill Romanowski with us on the chat tonight. So for those of you that haven't had a chance to make your first entry in the 6 picks game, keep an eye out for that video when it is out this week. And Vansco will be looking for that top spot, I'm sure. All right, and as a matter of fact, Bill Romanowski says, I'm predicting I go 6 for 6 on the 6 picks this week. I believe that you would be predicting that, as would anybody who is playing the game. So, yep, you got to go in there and take your shot. So I know, Bill, that you will take that opportunity once those matchups are released for this week. So go out and get them. All right, let's see who is next here. Again, if I miss anybody, just let me know. I'm not intending to miss anybody, but sometimes I start scrolling around on these chats and somehow I miss someone. So just say, hey, Joe, you missed me, and I'll go back and get your chat. James Reyes is here. Welcome back, James. Somehow Jacoby Myers is in the free agent pool in a 10-man PPR. Got to hope the number 9 spot works out. Would love to have him as my 5th best receiver. Jacoby Myers has had a very nice amount of volume in terms of targets right now this year. Let me take a look at the wide receiver stats, just in case any of you else out there do have a Jacoby Myers that lands on your waiver wire and still available. Number 9 is going to be tough, but let's put it this way. If that guy is still there at this point, then he's flying on the radar in your league, and there's a good chance you're going to end up getting him, even if you have 9. For some reason, I cannot find Jacoby Myers on my wide receiver rundown. I'll keep looking here. Where are you? There he is, 38th currently in terms of overall fantasy production for the year. And as we look at his individual stats in his first 3 games, 9 targets, 6 targets, and 14 targets. That is pretty solid. 10, 8, and 18 in terms of fantasy points in those 3 weeks. We have seen some very nice production there in New England. Looks like they are more than willing to throw the ball. And again, now with James White out, you would expect, because that is your pass catcher out of the backfield that is no longer there. You would expect that to give a little bit of an uptick for the receivers there in New England as well. So yes, Jacoby Myers. And as I said before, when we talk about the waiver wire players, when I give you the top 5, I'm considering players that are currently rostered in less than 50% of all leagues. That doesn't mean there aren't other players out there in your particular league. So that's the situation for James. He's got a Jacoby Myers, and I would certainly probably put him above a guy like an Emmanuel Sanders at this point, because potentially Jacoby Myers is the number 1 target in that offense, and we don't expect Sanders to be that for Buffalo, even though he might continue to return some value. Myers, we're looking for that consistent volume, and always the guys that are considered number 1 on that team. That's something we want to look for. So yeah, James, I think this is a good shot for you. Go out and get that number 9 waiver wire claim priority to work out for you, and add him to your team, and then see how it goes throughout the rest of the year. Let me see if there are any follow-ups. I don't see any here. So good luck to you, James, on that. Fantasy Football Stats guy is back and says new on this computer, but was already subbed on the phone. Awesome. 2 subs from the same person. How can you beat that? So I'll say this. Our first real goal of subscribers was 100. 100 subscribers, obviously, as a new YouTube channel, that's what you look for first. And we were at 95 going into the day. I don't even know if I can refresh if it tells me how close we are to 100. I thought that perhaps we might hit that magical 100 tonight. I'm going to refresh on my other screen and see if it tells me. If not, I'm not sure if YouTube updates that quickly. And, of course, right now it's just spinning and doing nothing. So I guess YouTube isn't all that happy that I'm trying to see how many subs there are. But at any rate, we are looking forward to hitting that. We're up to 98 people. We're up to 98. We need 2 new subscribers to hit that 100 mark for the first time. We appreciate all of you people that are already subscribed to the channel. Glad to have all of you regulars that are with us. Again, as I always say, all those likes and all those subscribes. They certainly do help out the channel a ton. And so obviously that is a goal that we've been looking towards, and we're very close. So appreciate all of you who have helped us along that way. And Bill has that like button there in his chat. Let me see. I'm going to just go in order here as I continue to go down the line here. Fantasy Football Stats Guy. Top tight ends this year are, let me ask you this, Fantasy Football Stats Guy. If you were already subbed, was it under a different name before? I don't recall your name before, so I'm wondering if I might have been familiar. I try to remember the players or the viewers that are with us on a regular basis. I'm guessing you must have been probably with a different. I see what you had here. You said, I don't know if you remember, but I complimented you on the hat and said golf is about hanging out with the guys. All right, I got you. I don't remember what your name was, but it was a different name on that one, I'm sure, at this point. I do remember that very much, and I do have the same hat on. It's kind of the tradition on this show. I've been going with the same hat for a while here, and, of course, my golf game is not any better than it was last time we talked about it. So that is the situation. But at any rate, back to real stuff. Top tight ends this year are Kelsey, Gronkowski, Waller, Hawkinson, Schultz, Thomas, Knox, Andrews, Conklin, and Kittle. I certainly think George Kittle is going to be, I'm guessing you probably didn't, put these in any particular order. I certainly think that Kittle is going to turn out better by the end of the year than he might be right now. He's going to be that guy there. Kelsey is always great. Gronk, let's hope he's not injured. Waller, Hawkinson, I really like a lot. In fact, I've actually considered going out and trying to trade for him in one of my leagues this week, and I almost did, but then I didn't quite because I was going to involve James Robinson in that trade. And then I considered the fact that Robinson plays on Thursday, and if I did that, I might lose a player and potentially end up losing a week that I might otherwise want to go for the win this week. But as you say on your rundown, this tight end spot is difficult. And so if you don't have one of those top guys, often you're left with that spot where you don't know what you're going to get on a week-to-week basis, and possibly you're looking at a streaming situation. Dalton Schultz, Dawson Knox, Conklin, all players that are, you can't, how can you say for sure right now if it's going to turn out well with any of these guys? But remember, George Kittle, when he first hit the scene, you probably got him off the waiver wire that year, and he had a great year for you. So there are opportunities where players can turn it on that you didn't know about. Schultz is not a new guy that you wouldn't have known about. Dawson Knox is a guy that probably hasn't gotten a lot of play on fantasy football teams up to this point. But I will say I'm up here in Buffalo, so I am Bills Mafia. I thought for a while that Dawson Knox had some decent potential, and it's just a matter of him living up to that. And certainly it's a pass-first offense. So there is some opportunity there. So don't sleep on a guy like Dawson Knox. Tyler Conklin coming off of a big game. There was a lot of what am I looking for? Upside here about Irv Smith. And with Irv Smith not there anymore, somebody's got to fill that role. And could that be Tyler Conklin? And also the other guy you're talking about there is obviously Schultz with Dallas. So there are some players there that have some opportunities this early in the season, in any time in the season. That waiver wire, if the opportunity is there to kind of, even if you don't play those players right away, get them on your bench so that things start to go well, then you've got a leg up. That's kind of the situation I'm looking at there. Bill Romanowski says, hoping Pitts can get it going. I was a little bit concerned about Pitts through the draft just because of the fact that rookie tight ends sometimes take a little while to develop. And I know there was a lot of potential there. So far, it's probably not his fault. The Atlanta offense, not that good right now. So, yeah, that's something to see if they turn around here. Vansco, this is an interesting question here, Vansco. How droppable is Kenny Golladay in your eyes? I actually dropped him in one of my leagues this week. And I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would drop him in most leagues. In this particular situation, I dropped him because the particular league it's a unique league where you are mandated to have a certain amount of players at every spot. Like, for instance, you have to have at least 2 quarterbacks. You have to have at least 2 tight ends. You have to have at least 2 defensive. You have to have at least 2 kickers. So what happens is that you don't have a lot of bench depth. And I really wanted to add somebody, and I tried to figure out who was the least value to me to drop him, and it ended up being Golladay. Part of the reason why I could do that in that league is because it is a league where there are often more wide receivers available on the waiver wire than there are running backs. So I actually was picking up a running back, and I figured that if I lost the Golladay, then so be it. I might have the opportunity to find other receivers down the line, but it's a standard league, so the value for receivers is down a little bit, and therefore it ended up that Golladay was my drop. I have him on some other rosters. I wouldn't do that probably in most situations for Golladay right now because of this. There are a lot of injury issues all of a sudden in New York for the Giants. Shepard with injury problems, Slayton with injury problems. You're looking at Galladay off to a very slow start, but a player that you expected to do well there after arriving in New York. So therefore, is this the opportunity that he has to kind of get going with that team and kind of solidify his role in that offense? You would think for sure that he's going to see an uptick in volume at this point, especially if Shepard and Slayton continue to miss time there. If he doesn't see an uptick with those guys being out, then you know you're in trouble, and then you're absolutely cutting him. But this is the opportunity for him to kind of turn around there. So I wouldn't drop him right now. If the injury situation wasn't what's going on there, then it might be different. But because of that, I think that there is a chance that Galladay does pick it up just a little bit. So I would consider keeping him for a while if you can. If, you know, a lot of times you make those decisions that you absolutely feel like you have more upside in picking somebody up and you've got to cut somebody. And if it's the case, it ends up being Galladay, so be it. That happened to me. So, but I do think there is some value possibly down the road with Kenny Galladay to kind of hang on there. Bill Romanowski says, thank you again, Vansco, for the chat. Sutton and Javonte Williams, top two bench players, both from Broncos. Sutton is going to probably be continuing to have a good season now with more injury issues there for the wide receivers. Vansco says, I'm ready. That's the pick six. The six. See, this is what happens. Like when I named this game, I called it 6 picks because it's like a play on words because, you know, pick six. So now the problem is every time I keep talking about it, I keep saying pick 6, but it's not. It's 6 picks. Either way, you get the point. Vansco's ready. Looking forward to those picks when they get there. Dynasty Pylon says that's the first goal. Hell yeah. Talking about those subscribers. Again, the last time I refreshed, we're at 98. So let me look again and see if we've hit that magical 100 mark. Let my other screen refresh as hopefully it doesn't slow down the stream here when I refresh that other one. I like that picture quite a bit there, Dynasty Pylon. Make sure and get in the 6 picks game because I would love to see that picture on the leaderboard there. It would look really cool and give the guys like Romanowski and Vansco and all of them a run for their money there. But absolutely, thank you appreciate that chat. And we are still at 98, so we're so close. We might get there tonight, but you never know. Somebody give us those 2 subs. Get us to that 100. No, I don't want to do that. My whole thing with subscribers is, you know, if you guys enjoy the content, then I'd love to have you as a subscriber. I am not by any means going to be out there and try to say that, you know, trying to find just people to random just drop subs. That's not what I'm really about here. I value all you guys that are enjoying the content and that are with us as regulars. So if and when we hit that mark, that will be fantastic. So I do thank you guys all for being on the stream. Hector Gonzalez, one of our regulars. Speaking of regulars, you say stash Bateman or Curtis Samuel. I'm dropping LaVisca. The Jags are a mess. I certainly absolutely agree with that. Curtis Samuel, I'm not entirely certain about. Help me out and tell me what the expected time coming back here is for Samuel, because I haven't heard much about him lately. I'm looking up for notes right now on all these guys, and I'm going to check the same thing with Bateman here to see if there are any notes on when these players might be expected. So I usually use my other screen, but now I'm on my main screen, so I'm actually not even looking at the stream while I'm doing this. So hopefully that doesn't cause a problem, but we'll find out. Rashad Bateman for Baltimore, looking up the notes here, it still says IR. Let's see here. Harbaugh said wide receiver Bateman will return to practice this week. He went on IR when the rosters were finalized. It doesn't say when he is eligible, but they do think he'll need some time to get going. So the Baltimore situation for wide receivers is iffy, to say the least. Let me look up Samuel. I think that the situation in Washington is equally iffy at this point because of the loss of Ryan Fitzpatrick. So adding another receiver into the mix there is not necessarily great. Samuel, there are no notes in terms of his return, although he has missed his 3 games at this point. So it does look like he certainly would be eligible at this point to come back. Let me click on back over here to my stream, make sure I'm still here. Hey, I'm still here. That's pretty good. Either of these 2 guys, like, I don't know how I feel about either of them at this point. We saw a guy like Devin Duvernay, who was way down the line in terms of amounts, percentage of being rostered in different leagues. He got a little bit of run in the offense for Baltimore this week. Obviously, Sammy Watkins is there, and Sammy Watkins has not really proven to be a player that has consistent production for the entire season. So there probably are some opportunities there for Bateman. Samuel, last year he was kind of that gadget guy for Carolina, and could he be that for Washington? I guess the idea here is it's a coin flip because we really don't know what either of them could potentially be here. So I can't disagree with LaVisca that whole deal with not only is Jacksonville a mess, but the Chark, Chenault, and Jones thing is just like, out of those guys, I feel probably most comfortable with Jones at this point. Like, I even have considered dropping Chark in a couple of leagues. I don't think you can quite do that yet, but it's just kind of difficult to predict. So I can't fault you there for dropping LaVisca. Between those other two guys, I would probably say if I had to pick one, given the fact that I probably see that as a little bit of a coin flip, I'd probably pick Samuel just because we have seen some fantasy production from him in the past. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Like, I don't know what you expect from either of them, but also, Baltimore being more of a run-based offense, and Washington perhaps being more potential for throwing the ball might make Samuel of the two the guy that I might look towards there. But I think that's a total, either way, if you happen to get production out of one of them, then you've gotten basically something for nothing there. So I think that's kind of a coin flip. Thank you, Hector, for the chat. Let me see if there are any follow-ups here. Let me see. I don't see any. So thank you again for being with us. Dynasty Pylon, where I just had one here from you. Anything special at 100? I have considered it. Let's put it that way. I won't give anything away beforehand. But certainly that is being that was one of the first goals. That is something that I've thought about a lot. So we will figure that out if and when we hit that 100 point. And certainly you guys will be the first to know if we do go that way. Fantasy Football Stats Guy says that your name before was Joe. That sounds a little bit more familiar. Dynasty Pylon says YouTube doesn't show all the subs. It's kind of weird. I agree with that. I've kind of been just relying on this, this regular overall count that's not really specific to any one person, because I know that some subscribers are, you can see if they are and others you can't. That's not really a big deal. I've just kind of been keeping an eye on it. Obviously it's a nice little goal to have. Stats Guy says that's the full PPR points per game. That's the full PPR points per game order. I'm not sure what you're referring to there. I might need a little bit of clarification on this one, Fantasy. Perhaps you're referring to an earlier chat, but I see what you're saying. This is about the tight ends. Gotcha. That makes more sense. Again, tight end spot, man, it's just every year it's tough. Adrian Allegre, one of our regulars from last season. Welcome back, Adrian. I think this is the first time you've been with us this year. Glad to see you back. You got a trade question for us tonight, and you say Robert Woods for Josh Jacobs. I would do this deal if I were getting Josh Jacobs. Yes, I would do this deal. I know Jacobs is hurt, but again, that's kind of, like I always say, fantasy football is all about opinions. And by no means do I feel like my opinion is the only one out there. But for me personally, I'm worried about Robert Woods. And I think there potentially is more upside from Jacobs, but you're obviously taking the chance on a player who is hurt. So I might consider waiting on this deal until you actually know for sure that Jacobs is going to play. Of course, you expect that he is, but there are certainly situations where you can make a trade like this and all of a sudden, surprise, Josh Jacobs is not returning, and now you've just simply lost a player who at least has some value to your team, either in your lineup or as a trade piece. So if Jacobs were healthy, I would say once you get the word that Jacobs is back and ready to go and healthy, then I would absolutely try to make this deal. I think that's in your favor. And in the interim there is still Peyton Barber out there, who we talked about on the waiver wire, who you might be able to go out. Now let's say this: if you were able to pick up a Peyton Barber on your waiver wire this week, I would feel way more comfortable in offering this deal. I'm assuming, Adrian, let me see if there are any follow-ups here, that you are trying to acquire Jacobs. If I'm not assuming that correctly, then tell me, but I'm assuming that's what you're trying to do. So that would be my suggestion here, is either A, wait until you get word that Jacobs is back and ready to go, or B, if you want to try to make that deal now, go out and get yourself Peyton Barber first. You're going to handcuff yourself on Jacobs. That way, if he doesn't come back right away, you've got the guy who went out and already had. Peyton Barber had a great game this last week. 111 rushing yards, 23 carries with a touchdown against Miami. So it does look like the Raiders do favor Barber instead of Drake in terms of the replacement for Jacobs. I think you feel a little bit better about this deal if you can go out and make sure you have that situation shored up for yourself first, and then absolutely go for it and see if you can get away from Robert Woods if you desire to do so. Good luck with that. And Adrian, and I know I said this last year, but again, you're looking at your picture there. I want to say thank you for your service, and glad to have you back on the stream, and absolutely look forward to having you with us on future live streams as well. Vansco is here. Follow up on the Kenny thing. I have a hard time letting go of him. I agree. There are interesting receivers on waivers. Kirk, Renfro, Sanders, Pascal, Myers. Just not sure if they're better than Kenny. I think that Myers, in terms of the production that he's had, the volume for targets right now, I would certainly put ahead of Galladay. The other guys, I don't know if I would put them ahead of Galladay. Not Renfro, I don't think, because that pass game in Vegas that goes through Darren Waller, it's going to be too hit and miss. I don't think Pascal, the volume is there in Indy right there to put him ahead. Sanders is probably going to have some decent weeks in Buffalo. I don't know if perhaps he is in the same range as Galladay. And Christian Kirk, I want to see more consistent production from Christian Kirk first. I think that the upside is there for Galladay if he can just clearly there's something going on. We saw Galladay kind of in a shouting match on the sidelines there. You go out and you get a guy like that and you expect him to play well for you. And all of a sudden, what's happening? Like, why is he not trusted in your offense? We don't know what the answer to that is. But I think that if he were to be able to work his way in, I think that he would have a lot more upside on that team. And that's a reason to hold him. But of the people you listed there, to me, the one that stands out on that list that I would probably say would be ahead of Galladay right now is Jacoby Myers. We've seen that kind of continue to be volume right along the way for New England. And I don't know that we really expect it to change anytime soon. So that is the one who I might put ahead of Galladay if you needed to make that cut. Again, if you have somebody else that you can cut instead and you can end up keeping Kenny Galladay, then you've got some opportunities there. But I definitely agree with your thoughts there, Vansco. I know I'm in the same sort of spot. Stats Guy says, actually, you're right. It's the order: Kelsey, Gronk, Hawk, Waller, Dalton Schultz, Kittle, Logan Thomas, Knox, Andrews, Conklin. I'm going to go out on the waiver wire and try to find that guy Travis Kelce this week, see if he's available in any of my leagues. I really think there's good things ahead for this guy. I know there's a lot of potential there, and perhaps he hasn't turned it in and week out at this point. But, I mean, like, it really seems to me like this guy Travis Kelce has a really good chance to be a good player down the road. How can you go wrong with that guy? So, yeah, let me check and see. I will check. I don't know if he's available. Damn, that sucks. But, yeah, and nonetheless, the tight end spot, as it's an unending issue when it comes to fantasy football, and we're all in that same boat, especially if you're like me and you're not a guy that really actively tries to draft a top tight end and you kind of try to play it out later on in the year. Yeah, it's difficult, but that's what fantasy football is all about. That's why we play the game. Isn't that what Chris Berman used to say? That's why they play the games. Ilias Giftopoulos is with us, one of our regulars. Welcome back, Ilias. Should I try to trade Mike Williams to get Justin Jefferson? Absolutely. If you can get Justin Jefferson for Mike Williams, I would make that deal. If you don't, Mike Williams has been playing great for you, and you're still in good shape. But Justin Jefferson, to me, still has a tremendous amount of value. I think that you might have to add a piece along with Mike Williams. I don't know that you're going to get a 1-for-1 Williams for Jefferson at this point. But that being said, there are a lot of people who would value Mike Williams right now based on how well he has played. If you're able to offer something else that can help out that team in another area, perhaps you find a team who needs some running back depth in addition. You might be able to add a piece to that Mike Williams and make it a 2-for-1. Then I think you have an opportunity there. If you can get a Justin Jefferson, I would love to have him. I have him in a couple of spots already. I think he's going to continue to be a very fine player throughout the rest of this season. So I would say, yes, Ilias, if you can do that, I would look for the team. I would look for another area on that team's roster aside from Jefferson that you could bolster that with an extra piece to see if you can make that deal just a little bit sweeter for that person in your league. And if you can do that, and perhaps you're not losing a whole lot, if you're not losing some running back or something like that on your team to add that in a trade, then you're essentially, in terms of your side of things, you're still doing a Williams for Jefferson, you're just throwing in like a flex running back or a bench running back, something like that helps you make that deal a little bit better for you. So Bill Romanowski says that Chris Bremen impression was spot on. I don't know if it was spot on, but it was worth a shot. But thanks, Bill. So yeah, Elias, for sure. Let us know how this goes. You can add a Justin Jefferson to your lineup. I feel like that's a tremendous pickup if you can go out and get it. Step back and let us know. And again, glad to have you back on the stream tonight as well. Bill says, should you drop Robert Tunyan? He's number 6 wide receiver. Emmanuel Sanders. I'm not sure what you mean by number 6 wide receiver there for Tunyan. Sanders, Logan Thomas, Michael Thomas are available. Michael Thomas is available on your waiver wire. Put that claim in immediately. Like, put this screen off to the side, and before it gets any later and it gets closer to that 12 o'clock midnight time, get that claim in right now. Do not let somebody else pick up Michael Thomas. There is way too much potential when he comes back there. Those other guys, Sanders, Logan Thomas, great. But regardless, you were talking about full season's worth of value. I can't believe that he's sitting there. You got to go out there and get him right now. As far as Tunyan goes, frustrated, I guess, is the right word, because I know I've drafted the 2 players that were in line with where I typically would like to draft tight ends were Tunyan and Logan Thomas. So I have them both in a couple of spots. I think of the 2, Thomas has probably returned a little bit more value. Tunyan, you might have expected to be a little bit more touchdown dependent. It would be nice to see him start to play a little bit better. Should you drop him? If you're picking up, I think Logan Thomas for Robert Tunyan is a lateral move. I think either one has their good days and their bad days. And it's just so far we've seen more good days from Thomas. I don't think that means that Tunyan won't play well, but this just sounds like typical tight end frustrations to me. Because what's going to happen here is if you're a player who has Tunyan and you can get Thomas and you're unhappy with Tunyan, then you're going to swap them out. And all of a sudden Thomas is going to put up a stinker. Tunyan's going to play a good game and you're not going to have him. And then it's just complete carousel. That's what happens so often at the tight end spot. So that's kind of why the answer to my question or my answer to this question is more about Michael Thomas. You'll figure out that tight end spot. If you have to stream tight ends, if you have to go out and look for one of those guys that we talked about, like a Knox or a Schultz, then you can do that. And the amount of production you're getting from them, is pretty close to what you're already getting from a Tunyan. But the potential you have for Michael Thomas when he comes back to me is way above any of those tight ends at this point. So you got to make sure you could figure out those other things later. I would make sure and get that Michael Thomas on your roster right now before somebody else. He's out they expect him out for 6 weeks. Their bye week is week 6, and they would expect him to be back in week 7. If it works out that way, you're talking about, 17 games. You got him for 10 games. It's pretty big for your roster. I would go out and try to get him ASAP if possible. All right, Bill, thank you for the chat. Good luck on the 6 picks this week. I know you're going 6 for 6, so I'll be looking for it. LeBron's Brain is back. Welcome back, LeBron's Brain. I have found myself with T. Higgins, Julio, Pittman, Gallup, Juju, Boyd, Emmanuel Sanders, and Hardman. A whole lot of mediocrity. I need a solid receiver that is above their tier or a solid flex running back. Recommendations. Let me call up the list on my other screen here of so to me, it's a lot easier when it's more difficult to trade wide receiver for wide receiver, to trade within the same position than it is to trade to another position. So it seems to me that you might have a better opportunity to look for a running back here. Try to target a team in your league that has a lot of depth at running back and very little depth at the wide receiver spot. And the fact that you have so many of these guys that are kind of in the mid-range means that you might be able to make that trade happen with one of those players, because you can offer them a 2-for-1. If they need that depth, that it might be valuable to them to have 2 of these guys. I think Julio has a lot of name value, even though we haven't seen great production yet. Out of all these guys that you've listed here, the 2 that I like the most are T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, actually. I would not get rid of both of them. I would like to keep one of those 2, but it's not going to help you. Your roster is not being helped by having both of those guys on there. It's going to be too difficult to determine in that Cincinnati wide receiver core which guys get it every week. Obviously, Higgins is out injured. To me, he and Jamar Chase are the number 1 options there. I think Chase is going to pan out to be the number 1 overall. But Higgins, I think, is still going to be ahead of Boyd. Boyd will still have some good weeks. We saw him have a good week this week with Higgins out. So I like your opportunities there to keep one of them and get rid of one of them, and perhaps package one of the other receivers with them. Perhaps that's a Julio at this point. Emmanuel Sanders certainly is not. You probably didn't cost you much to get him. Hardman, all these players, but I would say for sure one of those two Cincinnati players because you don't need both of them. It's going to be too hard to make that decision. If Julio is the biggest name, he can return you the most value. I don't know what the rest of your roster is, but I do think that there is some opportunity there. So as I look at the running back list, who do I think you could get for a combination of like a T. Higgins and a Julio? I don't think you're going to get a top guy. I think you're looking at a mid-range guy at best. I think you're looking at someone in the range of perhaps a James Robinson. Perhaps that is somebody who the person who has James Robinson is concerned with the Jacksonville offense, and he may be turning it back around after a slow start. So I think he's in that range. Other players that are not as high as might have been expected. I mean, Antonio Gibson is running back 19 right now. I don't know if you're going to get a Gibson for it all depends on a lot of these trades depend on the actual roster composition of these other teams. Because in order to make a good trade, you need to be making sure that other team feels like they're getting something back. It's difficult to make a trade where you just absolutely get the best of it and the other person gets nothing, especially if you're playing in a competitive league. So that's kind of why I'm looking for mid-range players. I think that for sure, what was I just saying? James Robinson is a player in that range because of the slow start. Who are other players along that way that are in that ballpark? You're looking for a flex running back. I don't know if Chris Carson, it depends on other rosters. Chris Carson is possible, probably still a little bit too high on that list. Perhaps a David Montgomery is somebody. Other players who for sure I think you could target are a guy like a Mike Davis who hasn't played great so far, but is the main guy in Atlanta. Daryl Henderson is hurt right now in LA, but you would expect some decent things out of him. Zack Moss is starting to turn it on a little bit in Buffalo. He is normally the guy who gets the goal line touches there, so there is some value. And some of these guys you might not need to trade two players for. You might be able to swing a T. Higgins for a Zack Moss and absolutely get it. Other guys I'm looking at the list here, I don't know Tyson Williams. You probably definitely wouldn't need two to get that. A Myles Gaskin. These are players that I feel like are the people who have them might be willing to get rid of them at this point is basically how I'm looking at it. I don't know if there are very, very many others who are worthy. Now, two players that I will say that are more in the flyer range that you might take a shot at here are Javonte Williams from Denver. A lot of people expect him to take. He's in a split with Melvin Gordon right now, but if he overtakes Gordon later on down the road, then towards the second half of your season, he could have some nice production for you. And the other guy here is going to be Trey Sermon for San Francisco because we don't really know exactly what he is yet. And I say that not because you, as the person who are trying to acquire him, knows what he is, but I say that because the person who currently has him might be willing to let go of him because of that fact. If they feel like they're getting a player they need, if they need a wide receiver to bolster that side of their roster, then they might be willing to get rid of a guy like Trey Sermon. You're taking a little bit of a gamble, but there is some upside there if that player does pan out. So those are players that I would look at in that range that you might be able to get that could actually work out in your favor. I would also consider possibly a Josh Jacobs as somebody who you might be able to reach for if the team that has him is unhappy with his injury problems. But those are kind of the guys that I would think would be in that range. But either way, LeBron's, I called you LeBron like LeBron James. Good luck to you on whatever you're going for with that trade. And I want to hear back and see how that works out for you because I definitely see where you're coming from with that. But you got a lot of names there where it's going to be like with all these names, it's going to be very difficult to pick from week to week which guy that you want to start. So certainly I think there is a lot of value there in trying to turn that into somebody else. Good luck with that, LeBron's, and thank you for being back on the stream. Let me go ahead and just remind everybody for everybody that is here right now that the live chat is open. I know that the title of our show is Waiver Tuesday. Tuesday waiver. I don't know whatever I called it. So we've already gone through that content. For those of you that missed out on that, talking about the top 5 waiver wire players, I'll re-hit that again at the end of the show, just as a reminder of who we had. But in the meantime, it's live chat. That's what we're here for. And we continue to do that. If you are on with us, feel free to drop us a question. If I miss you for any reason, just let me know, hey, you missed mine, and I will scroll back up and find it. But appreciate all of you for being on the stream. And absolutely, we always prefer to be talking with you than just talking to you. So it's great that we have content for you, but the chats are more important. Next one up in line here, one of our regulars, Aladdin. Glad to have you back. Aladdin, would you drop Carter for Mac. Carter's a tough player to me because I've held on to Carter. I drafted Michael Carter in just about every league this year. I just felt like that there are a few players in drafts that could turn into something later on down the road. And I put him in a category of what you would have thought about Antonio Gibson last year in the draft. And certainly Antonio Gibson worked out very well. It's not like it's always going to work out that way. But I have held on to Carter as much as possible at this point. It has seemed like he has continued to be a little bit more of the volume there in the Jets offense. It's just that the Jets are not very good. But that could turn around for Carter. Certainly we've already seen Tevin Coleman doesn't seem to be in the mix anymore. And now it's Ty Johnson that's there. And I don't know if I really have the actual stats. But it does seem that there still is potential for Carter. I would love to keep him around. You might have just enough time. You might get another week before you figure out where Mac goes, because it's pretty certain to me that Mac is going to wind up on a roster somewhere. I think that Marlon Mack still has some good production in him on a team that needs a runner. So where is that? Who knows? Like, does he end up in San Francisco? That would be a mess. It's already a mess there. Does he end up in Baltimore? Are there other teams that are looking for a running back, or does he kind of just wait it out and potentially end up on a roster later on? I do think that Marlon Mack is a name to pick up somewhere down the road. It's just kind of a matter of when. And so until he lands on a roster, I don't think I want to drop a Michael Carter for him, because you're still waiting to see what happens with that Carter situation. But once you have more certainty on where Mac goes, that will kind of answer that question for you. So I would definitely keep an eye on Mac and see where he lands, and then reevaluate at that point. And Hector Gonzalez has the same question here. Should I take Marlon Mack from waivers? It's kind of the same thing, although a little bit different if it's just if you're cutting somebody who is worthy of cutting, or perhaps you have an IR and you're able to put someone in your IR and you have basically an empty spot where you don't have to cut anybody. If that were the case, then I don't think it's a bad idea. If Mac doesn't end up on a roster right away, you can just cut him later on. But if he does, you've got him. So I don't think it's a bad thought. It's just a matter of how much are you willing to cut to get him. So Hector, if you're in a situation where the person you're cutting has very little value to your team, or perhaps you're able to open up a spot on your bench through like an IR player or something like that, then I don't think Marlon Mack is a bad idea. It's tough to find running backs on the waiver wire that can really help your team once you get into the season. I mean, there are a couple out there this week, Chuba Hubbard we talked about, but if you don't have the number one priority, you're probably not getting Chuba. Peyton Barber is a guy that you'll probably be able to get without the number one priority, depending on Josh Jacobs' status. But that is not neither one of their long-term situations. Certainly Marlon Mack, if he landed on a team, he's not going to be the number one on that team, most likely, no matter where he ends up. But what you hope for is a situation where, he has an opportunity to be at least in a timeshare that's in his favor. The funny part here is, what if he ends up with the Jets? Then what are you going to do? Then there goes all your Michael Carter, because now you got Mac and Carter. That would be terrible. But yeah, keep an eye on it. He's going to go somewhere. He's going to have some value. It's just a matter of where at this point. Thank you, Hector, for the chat. And A. Aladdin jumps back in here with Emmanuel Sanders or Corey Davis rest of season. I don't know how to answer this because Sanders is at best number 3 in Buffalo, and Davis is at best number 1 for the Jets. And I don't mean to offend any Jets fans, being that I'm in Buffalo here, but the difference between the Buffalo passing game and the Jets passing game at this point is considerable. So a number 3 in Buffalo and a number 1 in New York are probably pretty close. My instinct here is to say Davis, because of the fact that you would expect the volume to be more consistent. It's just that he might not do that much with the volume, especially when the quarterback there is throwing the ball to the other team a lot also. Well, you put me in a spot here, Aladdin. I don't know. This is total, like, this is the one where if you ask 100 people, you're probably going to get 50 answers on one side and 50 on the other. I think for me, I probably say Davis here, because I probably prefer the fact that you expect him to be a number 1 receiver on a team that's going to be trailing in a lot of games. And Sanders, I thought going into the season that it was going to be one of these up and down things. So far, it's been pretty decent there. So he is starting to emerge a little bit higher up than I might have thought he was. If I had to pick one here at this point in the season, I probably would still, let's say this. 2 weeks ago, I would have said Davis, absolutely. Now it's close, and in another 2 weeks, it might be Sanders. That could be happening. So if you had to make that decision right now, flip a coin. Either one. Sanders have it coming off the good game, and the Jets coming off scoring 0 points might make your decision for you. Hope that helps, A-Lad. And I know sometimes my answers to these questions are not like a simple yes or no. They're more about information that points you in the direction that's best for you, because everybody's roster is different. Everybody's team is different. And what is best for me and what is my opinion might not be best for you, but hopefully the information that we talk about leads you in a direction that you can feel like it is the best decision for your team. That's kind of the way I look at things. And all you guys that are regulars, you know that's the way it is. That's the way I normally look at this. So thank you, A-Lad, for the question. Rockout is back on the stream. Welcome back, Rockout. Keep Hooper or pick up Knox. If I'm considering, is Austin Hooper your starter or is he your backup tight end on your roster? If he is your backup tight end, then I think you're absolutely good to go take a shot at Knox here at this point. Austin Hooper for the Browns in a pure run-first offense. I don't think the opportunity is going to be there as much as it's going to be there for Knox. And Knox is on the upswing, I think, in terms of his potential. I think it's starting to turn around. I'm going to look at some numbers here for Austin Hooper on my other screen. Of course, they have had injury problems there in Cleveland in terms of pass catchers, which you would think would mean that Hooper could see a little bit more volume. So that's why I kind of want to take a look at what he's done so far in terms of targets. I'm not sure that it's been great. 3 targets the first week, 5 targets the second week, 3 targets the third week. And if you compare that to Dawson Knox, 4 targets the first week, 3 targets the second week, and 5 the third week. Very similar numbers, but fantasy points, are they also similar? Hooper's 6, 9, 10, and Knox has been 8, 10, 15. So pretty close. I think to me I think there's probably more upside with Knox. It seems like he's trending in the right direction, and I don't know that Hooper is trending in either direction for where he's been. But I think simply the fact that, you expect Buffalo to be passing almost every game and Cleveland to be running it almost every game, to me means that you have a better chance at consistent opportunities for Dawson Knox there. So again, if this is your tight end too, if this is your backup, I wouldn't feel like you're at all wrong in taking a shot here on Knox at this point. Let me see. There's a follow-up here. It looks like it might be from the same. And Tyler, Conklin, and Schultz available, but I got Jefferson at wide receiver. Out of all these guys, again, I'll tell you this. Like, I'll put up the just as a reminder, the top 5 players that I have this week on the waiver wire are right here, and so, of course, there are several. I ranked Dalton Schultz this week as the highest tight end that is available, slightly ahead of those other guys. So to me, like, Dalton Schultz is the one if you're looking at between those others. Now, on my bonus ads, as you see here, I did include Knox and Conklin. I just simply feel like Dalton Schultz probably is in the better situation of all these guys at this point, and he's seen a little bit more production. Schultz has had, in terms of targets, 6, 2, and 7 in the last 3 games, and fantasy points 11, 4, and then 26, which is that's a big number. He's the tight end 5 for the season. So to me, if you're talking about which one of those guys do you want to go for, Rockout, I think that Schultz is probably, if I had to rank them, Schultz would be 1. I'd probably put Knox 2, and I'd probably put Conklin 3, especially since you said you have Jefferson there. I think Conklin is going to be more volatile, more up and down. I think Knox has the opportunity to be a little bit more consistent, but I think Schultz out of those 3 is probably the top guy that I would look at there. Hope that helps you out there, Rockout, and appreciate the you say he is your starter. I still would probably feel comfortable with Schultz over Hooper. You expect Dallas to be throwing the ball a lot more than Cleveland. That's probably the way I put it. But again, you're in the same situation that many of us are, that you're going to end up going through probably 6 different tight ends this year, because you'll cut Hooper, you'll bring in Schultz, Hooper will score 20, and then you'll say, no, I gotta give me Hooper back. Hooper will score 2, and then Schultz will score 20 the next week, and it's just complete utter frustration at the tight end spot. But this is what happens. I wish you the best, as anybody would be there. Let me go back up. Bill Romanowski, you say fantasy team's number 6 wide receiver. I think that's what I was asking before about your question about I'm looking for a Tunyan. And then you say it's a 10-man league. And if you say thanks, I said, well, no, thank you, Bill, for being here. I always thank you guys for being here. A. Aladdin says Robbie Anderson or Deshaun Jackson, any worth a pickup? Well, so far we have not seen Robbie Anderson be what he has been there in Carolina. I don't know if that's just a Sam Darnold thing where he looks for DJ Moore. Seems strange given the fact that they played together before in New York that he wouldn't see him as much. But let me call up the targets for Robbie Anderson. I have to scroll quite a while because he's not very high on this list. There he is, Robbie Anderson. 11 targets for the season, 103 yards receiving overall. If you break that down game by game, 3 targets in week 1, 6 targets in week 2, and 2 targets in week 3. Not a lot to help you out there at all. Deshaun Jackson, who I have researched already this week for the waiver wire, saw 5 targets this past week, but very little in other weeks. Obviously, Deshaun Jackson is going to be a complete boom or bust guy, in my opinion. You'll see big games like he had. You'll see other games where he doesn't exist in the offense. However, right now, it's almost like Robbie Anderson doesn't exist in the offense at all. You have to think there are better days ahead for Robbie Anderson, but so far we haven't seen it. At least for Deshaun Jackson, you have seen one big game. I think either way, like if you're going to pick one of these 2 guys up, I think it is a flyer situation for you. You're kind of picking it up with the intention of what if they play well and keep playing well. So to me, I think there's more upside probably for Jackson than there is for Anderson. I think there's a better chance for Anderson to have more consistent weeks, but so far it's consistent at not very much. So I probably, if it's kind of looks like if you're treating this as a dart throw, then I might treat this as Jackson as a possible dart throw here. Anderson, I don't know until we see it. It's hard to say. And A. Aladdin is probably laughing at me. I'm guessing that's laughing at my analysis of the Sanders and Davis situation there, but it's all good. Thank you, Rockout, for the question there. Or whose question did I just answer? I just answered A. Aladdin. Thank you guys both. LeBron's brain, you say if you get Hubbard and plug Pittman in at wide receiver and Hubbard at flex, who would you put in at wide receiver 2 out of your jumble mess? Let me scroll back up and I'm not going to put it on the screen, but I'm going to just scroll up to see all the names you had on there just so I don't get them wrong. I kind of remember them. Where is your other chat? Oh, I'll find it. It's here somewhere. Give me a second. There it is. Who would I put in? I think that, again, I like the situation in Cleveland. I think if T. Higgins continues to be out, I think that Tyler Boyd is going to still have nice value there. I might like his floor the best out of everybody else. Julio Jones, if A.J. Brown misses time, I think Julio Jones is absolutely your choice. And if he doesn't play well, you just have to live with it because Julio Jones is too good of a player for him to be a number 2 on his team and the number 1 guy to be out with injury. And to think that Julio is not going to have good days, I can't imagine that's not the case. So if that's the case there, I think Julio has to be that guy. So you got to watch your reports. Even if A.J. Brown is there, you might still have to take Julio and see what happens because none of those other guys really stand out to me all that much. Juju, I think, was banged up this last game. If Deontay Johnson is still out, then Juju is going to have more value given the fact that there is more volume coming his way, especially if Big Ben continues to throw 185 passes per game. So there's potential there. The bottom line is there's potential with just about every guy you have on this list. However, there's not a real level of comfort with any of them. I have to pick out Julio as the guy that has to go in there to me. And just because you got to think, especially if Brown is out, you got to think that they're playing the Jets and they're playing Jacksonville. If they can't get it done, if their offense doesn't look good against them, then their offense is in trouble overall. So I gotta pick Julio out of there, but I will say I also like Boyd. If Higgins is back, I like Higgins as being like one of the main 2 guys in an offense in Cincinnati. So it's probably to me one of the 2 Cincinnati guys or Julio. Sanders played well, but I don't know that if you see Sanders have 2 games in a row that are super great, then you might look at him differently. But right now, Stephon Diggs is not going to be 3rd in fantasy points on the Buffalo Bills every week. It's just not going to happen. So is a Sanders being third on that team going to give you the same value that you're getting from a Julio being potentially one? Probably not. I think you take that chance with the Julio there. But you're going to be rotating door. Look, you're going to play matchups, and that's something to look for every week. Who has the best matchups? That's what it's going to end up being for you. But either way, hope they crush it for you, LeBron's brain, and let us know how it works out. And hopefully, you're getting those jumbled messes that you got there are turning into a bunch of wins. Bill says, should I drop Eli Mitchell for Chuba Hubbard? Absolutely, in a heartbeat. To me, the situation in San Fran is too difficult to predict. And even if Mitchell is available, I don't think he's necessarily ahead of Trey Sermon. And if he is, there's no way you'd be able to predict that. I absolutely would pick up Hubbard instead. You're going to have 2 weeks. If McCaffrey is out for 2 weeks, then you expect Hubbard to slot in with a very nice amount of opportunity for Carolina. Again, the matchups are not super great. Dallas, 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs, and then Philadelphia is 12th most. But we're not really talking about matchup plays here. We're talking about the guy that we expect to be. Now, I know Royce Freeman is there, but I will be surprised if all of a sudden Carolina decides Royce Freeman is the main guy and Chuba just gets a few carries. Just don't see that happening. I think he has a solid floor because of the volume with a chance for some really good upside, and I would not hesitate to play him as an RB2 while McCaffrey is out. I can't say the same thing about Mitchell. There's no way in the world I would say that I expect Mitchell to be an RB2 for the next 2 weeks. So yes, absolutely. If you don't have any better options to drop, I wouldn't be surprised if this would be your best option to drop. Yes, I would drop Mitchell for Hubbard. Again, Bill, I always say this, you guys know your rosters better than anybody. So sometimes I say things and you might be like, yeah, Joe, that makes sense. Or no, Joe, I'm not doing that. And either way, I don't fault you, but that would absolutely be my thought. You say if Hubbard survives the waivers tonight, do you not have what's your priority must not be very high? You say Hubbard. I know who you're talking about. I'm guessing your priority isn't all that high to get him. He's not going to survive waivers. I can't imagine he survives waivers in any league. I know that in a bunch of my leagues, I have waited to use my priority. I like to do that and let that number go up. And I happen to be at number one. And absolutely, I'm making sure that nobody else in those leagues gets this guy. Regardless of who I have in my roster, I'm going to get him if possible. And I can't imagine there's any league out there that is not going to do the same. So if you don't have that priority, I think it's going to be hard to come by. If nobody else picks him up, then they are sleeping on him. And that's to their peril and to your benefit, Bill. So I hope that it does work out for you there. Jonathan Lee here. Should you drop Koo for a better kicker? I can't say I've done a lot of research on the kickers at this point. I don't know who's available in a lot of leagues. So that would be a complete lack of information on my part. I could try to look that up really quick to see what players are less than 50, but I have no idea. I can say I'm looking on my one screen at the current rankings, and Daniel Carlson is ranked number 1 of all kickers. And I feel like Daniel Carlson for the Raiders might be a player who is available in a lot of leagues because he's not as big of a name guy. And so as I look at, he is at 66% rostered right now on Yahoo. Looking at other players who are high up on the list but are not rostered all that much. Brandon McManus for Denver is 34% on Yahoo and is currently 2nd overall for the year. After that, it takes you a little farther down the list, but there certainly are in terms of, Younghoe Koo is rostered in 86% of leagues, and he is currently in on the overall list. Let's see here. Well, I don't even see him. Did I miss him? Where is he in the overall fantasy points this year? So far, I don't even see him. He's in 25th. So that tells me there are a lot of players that you could certainly look to. Again, it's kind of going to be a matchup thing here. But there certainly are players out there. To me, if a guy like Daniel Carlson is available, being that he's number 1 right now, you got to look to him. Matt Gay from the Rams, 84%, probably not available in your league. Dustin Hopkins for Washington, his numbers are, let's see, he's a little bit farther down the line. He is only rostered in 8% of all leagues, and he is currently the 8th highest fantasy kicker. Graham Gano for the Giants, another guy who's probably not rostered very much, currently in 9th. So there are some guys out there. I would take a look at not only the guys where they rank right now, but I would also take a look at guys that have matchups where, again, with kickers, like it's not like there's a hard fast way to predict, but pretty much you go with what the sites that you trust tell you. If you see a team, a matchup that's in green, I don't question that. If it tells you that they're one of the top teams that kickers score points against, then I'm like, great, like let's go with it. I know I did that last year a couple times with the kicker for Miami, Sanders, where he wasn't like one of the top guys that was rostered, but he had some green matchups, and I just went with it. It ended up working out okay. So I would say, you might be in a situation where you end up switching kickers a couple of times. There's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing different than streaming defenses. But there are certainly guys who are higher up the list on what they've done so far this year. Hard to predict, much more than that. But when you're talking about Atlanta's offense has not been good. You certainly want an offense that's a little bit more productive than what Atlanta has been. Washington is probably that with a Dustin Hopkins. I don't know that the Giants are necessarily that, but it's hard to predict. If a Mason Crosby is available, I didn't look to see his numbers. Even a guy like that. Kind of a toss-up there, but I do wish you the best there, Jonathan Lee, with whichever guy that you go for. Hey, Aladdin, would you drop Rojo for Gio Bernard? I would run away from every person in the Tampa Bay backfield as far as I could at this point. I would not drop Rojo in terms of if you were going to choose one of these two guys to stash on your bench, but I wouldn't be playing him either because it's too much uncertainty with that backfield between him and Fournette. And if you absolutely have to play someone from the Tampa Bay backfield, then you're just playing him and hoping at this point. But I don't think that Gio is solid enough in terms of his volume with that team right now, given the fact that it's Rojo, Fournette, and Gio. I think out of all those guys, they keep trying to say that Rojo is the guy. He never really ends up being that guy. But in terms of which one you're going to keep on your bench, I think it's got to be Rojo there, unless you see something drastically change. I know Gio had a decent game, but I just don't think that's every week situation. Thank you, Aladdin. Jonathan Lee, should I drop Steelers for a better defense or wait for TJ Watt to get back? I struggle with this keep one defense all year long or stream defenses thing often. The more competitive your league is, the better off you are to stream defenses. And now instead of trying to pick a team that has a good defense, you're basically picking the team that they're playing against that is not good. And to me, like that's having lost enough fantasy matchups to other teams that are streaming defenses when I haven't been. A lot of times I would rather be able to just stick with one defense just to not have to worry about it. But it seems like a lot of times that doesn't end up working out for you. Certainly we've seen like Cleveland and Denver in past weeks this year have done really well. I know I've been looking around for teams that are having a couple of nice matchups coming up. The team that I've targeted right now that I'm going to try for, hopefully none of my other people in my leagues are listening, is Tennessee right now, playing the Jets and the Jacksonville Jaguars in back-to-back games. So they, to me, are a streamer that probably is out there and available, and I'm sure other people are just as aware of that situation as I am, but that is one of those teams that I'm looking for. Pittsburgh, certainly you expected to be a top defense this year, and it hasn't absolutely worked out that way. So if you're dropping them, you are basically committing yourself to the fact that you are probably going to be streaming a different defense for a couple weeks at a time for the rest of the year. So be prepared for that and start to look, instead of just looking at the week that you're in, start to look weeks ahead and figure out what you want to do so that you don't have to waste a waiver priority on that. And you could pick up, let's say you want to pick up a defense for week 5 and it's week 4. You get them for free now. That way you can continue to build up your waiver priority number and use that later on for players that are more important to your roster, like we talked about with Chuba Hubbard. If you end up in a situation where sometimes you do, where you have to use that priority each week to get your defense, so be it. You got to win games. But if you can play a week ahead, then that certainly helps you out in both ways. And you also say, Jonathan, is it okay to drop Juju? Just not much of a fan. I would try to trade him. Juju has value among other players, and I'm sure there's somebody in your league that you could look for a deal with. He's probably too valuable to just drop, but doesn't mean that he has enough value that you have to play him every week. I understand what you're saying with that. I would look for a trade on Juju. It doesn't have to be a big super top guy, but look for a running back that's a flex type running back, somebody who has a little bit of value or somebody who has some potential that you might be able to get. We talked about guys like, even if you just, let's put it this way. If you're cutting Juju, then any value that you pick up in a trade is better probably than what you're cutting for. So let's say, go out and get like a Tony Pollard who is producing, or Nyheim Hines who is producing, Cordero Patterson who is producing, but they aren't the main guys. Lower down the line, guys that are like people might not be that happy with right now, like a Mike Davis. We talked about Zack Moss before, players like that. you may be able to get those players even on a 1-for-1 with somebody like Juju. And if that happens, you've at least added depth to your bench in another area. So I think that to me is a better option than just straight dropping Juju, because chances are if you straight drop Juju, that he's going to be picked up instantly from somebody else on your team. And so if the player is that valuable that somebody else is going to pick him up instantly, then he may be valuable enough where somebody is going to move a player from their team for him. So I would try to look for a trade for Juju, even if it's not a super top guy. Doesn't have to be. The player could somehow work out for you down the road, in a better fashion than just dropping it would be. So I would look for a trade there if you could, Jonathan. Aladdin, is Dillon worth a stash? Unless you have Aaron Jones, not AJ Jones. If you have Aaron Jones, then I think that is the situation where you have Dillon on your bench. If you don't have Aaron Jones, I don't think you need to have Dillon at this point. There's just not enough there, in my opinion. You can find other players who can benefit your team more that are the number 2, like we just talked about, Nyheim Hines, Cordero Patterson. These are players that are showing production, even though they're the number 2 on their team. Dillon's production, I don't think, is going to be at that level because Aaron Jones is just too good. So barring an injury, again, we never hope to see anybody get injured. If you have Jones, then I think that is the situation where you stash Dillon. If you don't have Jones, then I don't think you need to go out and get him. That would be my opinion on that. Aladdin, hope that helps you out there. Bill Romanowski, you say number 3 waiver, but you're saving it. I can see that. I will also say that there are going to be few opportunities this year where the player is more valuable than Chuba Hubbard is right now. It's week 4 right now, and so far, has there been anybody that's been at the same level at this point? Probably not. We saw Eli Mitchell be one of those guys very early on that everybody went crazy for, and he's virtually not existent anymore at this point. So I think there are rare occasions where you're going to see somebody that has more potential to help your team, even if it's only for a couple of weeks, than Chuba has right now. But at the same time, I don't blame you for saving that because I know I look at that a lot the same way. I don't think it probably doesn't make a difference because I'm guessing I'll be surprised if that number 1 in your league does not take Chuba Hubbard. If he doesn't, and perhaps nobody else does, and you get him for free, then that works out well for you too. But I'll be surprised if the number 1 priority in everybody's league does not pick up Hubbard tonight. And Bill, you say have a great night, everyone. I say have a great night to you as well. Let me take one more opportunity to promote our 6 picks game. As I know Bill has mentioned several times, but here are the standings. Take a look for when the new 6 picks video is out for this week and get your name on that leaderboard. Just an opportunity to play along and make those picks. We keep the standings all season long. Vansco in second, Bill Romanowski in third, both chasing our leader, Chris Noriega, right now. Season-long competition, and all you got to do is make those picks on the 6 picks video every week. So pretty simple. There's no cost to play or anything like that. It's just a game for you, the viewers. And Bill Romanowski has already predicted that he will be 6-for-6 this week. Speaking of Vansco, there he is. Eli Mitchell was dropped in one of my leagues. Am I right to think he's a better pickup than Patterson? I don't know that I think, to me, neither one of these guys, but if one of the two is panning out more right now, it's Patterson to me. Partly because it's too difficult to figure out who you're going to trust in that San Francisco backfield. I don't know if it's going to be Mitchell. I don't know if it's going to be Sermon. Jeff Wilson eventually will be back. They're bringing in other players. I don't know what's happening there. I'm guessing that of these 2 players, Mitchell will probably sit on your waiver wire after being dropped, whereas Patterson is more likely to be picked up. So that being the case, if you feel at all that you would like to have him, it's probably the time now to get him because you can probably have a chance to go down and get Eli Mitchell later on. When you look at Patterson's numbers, certainly Mike Davis has not blown anybody away. He hasn't been having super production there. It's given Patterson some opportunity in Atlanta. He has had consistently 7 rush attempts in all 3 games, but the targets has been the biggest thing for him. And obviously a lot of platforms have him listed as both a running back and a wide receiver. So that gives you some flexibility there as well. But he's had 7 targets in each of the last 2 games, 5 catches in week 2, 6 catches in week 3. And obviously he had 2 touchdowns in week 2 for 24 fantasy points. Last week, he still had 16 fantasy points, 82 yards receiving, did not have a touchdown this last game against the Giants. I will say this, there is not a lot of green on his upcoming matchups. Washington on the platform I'm looking at is in the red, then the Jets, then a bye week, then Miami. Jets are not red or green. Miami is not red or green. Neither is Carolina. New Orleans in week 9 is in the red. The next matchup Patterson has against the team in the green is not till week 10. However, none of those games he's played so far has been against the team in the green either. So I think that probably if you're just looking to get either one of those two guys just to kind of set aside and see what happens, probably Patterson. It seems like there's more predictability in the workload he's getting right now than Mitchell. Could Eli Mitchell end up being the main-ish guy in San Francisco? He could, but that's about all you can say about him right now is he could. And I think it's easier to say right now that Patterson has solidified that role that he has, and you can kind of know what to expect there. So I think all those things being said, I think probably Patterson would be just a little bit favorite over Mitchell to me at this point. Hope that helps you out there, Vansco. Whichever way you go there, as I always say, hope those players crush it for you, or at least crush it on your bench. James Reyes, sweet. Talked my way into getting Saquon and Woods and Brandon Cooks for Miles Sanders, Chark, and Chase. Proud of my work. You got Saquon Barkley for Miles Sanders. So that's an upgrade running back. I would assume to me, it's an upgrade. You picked up Robert Woods on a buy low, but all you traded away was DJ Chark and Jamar Chase. I like Jamar Chase a whole lot. Brandon Cooks has been playing very well, and Robert Woods you would expect to have production, although he hasn't shown it yet. But the big win for you is getting Saquon here. So yeah, I think you've done well for yourself there. I would feel bad to not have Jamar Chase on a roster anymore, but if it was a person I needed to put in a deal to make that happen with Saquon, it's because it's very possible that you're not even starting Jamar Chase based on who else you have on your roster. So yeah, you've done well there. I like it. Saquon Barkley looks to be back and healthy, and you would expect his production to continue. Miles Sanders is a player that I was a little bit hesitant on this year, not because of his talent, but just because when you've got a guy like Jalen Hurts as your quarterback, you look at the teams that have quarterbacks that like to run the ball, and you start to question what you're going to get out of those running backs, because do they steal a lot of goal line touches, that sort of thing? Like you think about last year with Kenyon Drake in Arizona, Kyler Murray got a lot of those opportunities that went by the wayside. Baltimore's a little different because they're such a run-heavy team. But like a team like Buffalo or a team like Kansas City where they throw the ball all the time, for sure Buffalo, Josh Allen is going to take a lot of those goal line touches away, and that's why you see less value for some of their running backs there. So I've put Miles Sanders in that same category this year, and it'll remain to see whether or not it actually works out that way or if he does still produce. Either way, Saquon in that offense in New York has to be the guy they lean on there, and you would think he's going to be that for the rest of the year. So, James, you have done well, and look forward to all these weeks ahead where you can try to see what Saquon gives to your team. So good work for you there, James. Glad that worked out for you, and thank you for letting us know about those trades. Again, always like talking fantasy football with you guys. James Reyes, good work. Vansco, I'm hurting with injuries to CMC and White. Just traded Drake, Gaskin, JD, and Hines are the backups. Yeah, that's I'm assuming it's a PPR league, so hopefully that means that you can still get something out of a guy like a McKissick or Hines. Out of all those guys, probably Hines right now is ahead because we've seen him be able to have some value there, and Jonathan Taylor is a little bit of a mystery why we would hope to see a little bit more out of him than what he's given so far. I expected Myles Gaskin to have a better year this year, but I'm starting to be skeptical at this point. I thought he was going to be a nice piece there in Miami and the main guy. I don't think that it's Malcolm Brown that's causing the issue. It might just be a little bit more the turmoil there in terms of the offense. You lost Tua, things changing around. You look at what happened this week with Mike Gesicki, who did little with Tua and then all of a sudden had a ton of targets with Jacoby Brissett. So I think that offense is a little bit difficult to predict. Hopefully for you, Vansco, McCaffrey is back soon. I know I'm in the same situation where I have McCaffrey in one of my leagues, and it's always frustrating when you ended up with that number one pick in your draft, and then something like this happens. So hopefully you're able to make your way through. I don't think trading away Drake really hurt you all that much. I don't think that that's a whole lot of value to be gained. But I think that you're looking at Hines as a guy that you can realistically plug in right now and still feel like he's going to get a lot of targets. Those other two guys are there. And you never know. I see you follow up here, Vansco. You say that you were high on Gaskin from last year, helped you win a championship. Yeah, I really expected better things for him this year than what we've seen so far. I'm surprised. I'm still hopeful. I haven't gotten rid of him. But he is the guy that at this point, if you get to the point where you are no longer thinking that he's going to have value for your team, then, you can always look for that 1 week where he does play really well and then decide if you think that could continue or if you think that is the high point and try to move off of them into a trade for somebody else. That would be the way I would be looking at it. And I do have him on a couple. I think I have him in at least one league. I'm not sure if I have him in more than one. But he's certainly a player that I would look at that way right now. Again, it's still early. We're only 3 weeks in. This is a 17-game season. So an extra week from before favors players like you guys that are out there doing your homework. Have some patience. I know it's difficult. I'm the same way. You never know when these things could turn around, but certainly the offense in Miami hasn't been exactly what we had hoped for. So it'll be it's one of those players that you keep an eye on and you kind of see where they go from there and figure it out down the road. So appreciate the chat, Vansco. I think we are through all of the chats right now. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and re-hit one more time our original content from the show, and then we'll probably call it a night. If anyone wants to get a couple of last-minute chats in there, please do so. But we're going to re-hit the original content from the show, and that is the top 5 waiver wire players to target for Week 4. And here they are. Chuba Hubbard at number 1. If you have that priority, you have a chance. If you don't, you probably don't, in my opinion. I think that he's going to be scooped up in just about every league. It remains to be seen, but that is my expectation. I think there's going to be some good value for your team there for a couple of weeks, even if you don't have McCaffrey. Number 2, Emmanuel Sanders for the Bills. I think his workload in that offense it's starting to prove itself there. Even if he's not the number 1 guy every week, you could see some value from Emmanuel Sanders. Tim Patrick is a guy for Denver that his value is steadily increasing all year long. I mean, he has been having decent production already, but with the injury problems in Denver now, they've lost now KJ Hamler. Patrick is in line for an uptick in volume. He's already had 14, 13, and 15 in terms of his fantasy points in the first 3 weeks. And you would expect more volume to be headed his way or coming his way on the way here or out that way in Denver, let's say. So Tim Patrick is a guy potentially that you can look for, possibly get as a lower number on your priority. Peyton Barber, a player to keep an eye on, and keep an eye on Josh Jacobs' status. If Josh Jacobs continues to be out, it is apparent that Las Vegas wants to turn to Barber instead of Drake to be the guy that replaces him. Barber with a great game this last week. So certainly there is some potential there. Another nice matchup against the Chargers this week, giving up the 11th most fantasy points to the running back spot. If Jacobs is out, consider Peyton Barber. Whether or not you have Jacobs or not, he might be a spot starter that you can use. And then the top tight end of all the guys on the waiver wire this week that I like is Dalton Schultz from the Cowboys, coming off a 26-point game. He's currently the tight end 5 overall for this season. He's had his targets 6, 2, and 7. So he's had 2 games of 6 or more targets and 2 games over 10 fantasy points this year already. So I put Dalton Schultz in the top 5. A couple of names as bonus ads this week. Not necessarily in the top 5. These are not in order of how I rank them. These are just in order of the percentage that they are currently rostered in. I just think 4 guys who are out there to keep an eye on and think about. Jalen Rhaegar from the Eagles. A player that I've talked about a lot on here, but his targets have been pretty consistent, 6, 5, and 8, 17, 3, and 10 in terms of fantasy points in the last 3 weeks. He should be out there and available in your league. A.J. Green with the name value, consistent in terms of he's had 6 targets every week for Arizona. 5, 13, and 16 were his fantasy points. Remains to be seen of what his production continues to be in that offense. There are a lot of mouths to feed there. Dawson Knox for the Bills, another tight end to consider if you're streaming tight ends. 8, 10, and 15 was his fantasy points in each of the last 3 weeks. And then Tyler Conklin, of course, had that big game with 20 fantasy points. This last week had a touchdown, 8 targets, 7 catches. The other 2 games, he only had 4 targets in each of them. So this is certainly the high in terms of targets. But again, there are frequently players who we might not have expected to have the production of the tight end spot, and all of a sudden you see them emerge. And could one of those guys be that guy for you? It's possible. If you don't get him on your bench, then you might miss out. So these are players to look at if you have opportunities to make those changes out there. Again, that's the waiver wire content for tonight's show. Of course, the waivers are coming up shortly for tonight, so we hope that you guys can get the players that you're looking for. I do see one more chat here. This is from your boy Carr. Now, is this the same person as your boy Mari? Because there's another your boy that's been on here. This might be a new viewer. Either way, thank you for the chat. You say, yo, guys, just got offered Allen Robinson for my Mike Davis. Don't have much running back depth, but I take that trade. Probably. In terms of ability-wise, that to me is an upgrade for your team. Obviously, there is concern with both of these guys right now. The upside probably is, and your boy says, new viewer. Great. Welcome, your boy. Glad to have you. There's another your boy, Mari, that's one of our regulars here. So I thought perhaps this was someone that just changed their name, but glad to have you on the stream. The concern with Robinson, I feel like he gets it going at some point because you have to expect at some point Chicago's going to figure this quarterback situation out. If they don't, then their coaching staff's going to be gone. I mean, that's pretty simple there. So they have to. Again, Atlanta's kind of in the same boat where they've got to get it figured out. But Davis, you expect to be the main guy there. But now that we have Cordero Patterson working his way in, has Davis's value gone down a little bit because of that? Possibly. Yeah, I think that you probably, like, either way, you like, either one of these guys has question marks, but I think you're probably right. You probably have to take that deal and get Robinson because either one of these players, you just basically hope that they turn it around at this point. The difference is that Robinson is the clear-cut number one on his team and on a team that is going to have to figure out what they're doing with their passing game. In Atlanta, so far, you've seen very little good things happening in that offense. And therefore, if they continue to struggle, then game script is not going to favor the running back in that offense very often. They're going to end up throwing the ball, playing from behind, and that is not Mike Davis, even though he can do that. That is what they've found that they like to use Cordero Patterson for. So I would say either way you're going with this, you're like, please let this guy start to play better. But it's probably Allen Robinson. I know what you're saying about the running back depth, but guess what? This is how fantasy football goes. If you make this deal now, and Robinson has 2 awesome games, now you have the leverage has swung to you, and you can ask yourself, okay, do I feel like Robinson is back and it's going to remain this way, or do you now turn around and sell high on Robinson and get a better running back than you had originally in Mike Davis? So if that happens, it gives you options, and all of those things being said, I do think that's the reason why that you do make this deal. So good luck to you, your boy Carr, and I see that your thoughts are exactly mine. Appreciate it, and glad to have you here. Appreciate you guys all being on the stream. Glad to have all you new viewers. I will say one last time for tonight, for all of you that have been on the stream, if you have not done so, if you're a new viewer, make sure and hit that subscribe button so that you can get those notifications whenever we have new content. And absolutely, if you're enjoying our content, feel free to drop us a like. Those likes and those subscribes, they do help out the channel a ton. We are very close to our first goal of 100 subscribers. Last time I checked, we are 98. I'm not going to try to refresh it right now because I don't want my stream to all of a sudden go away when we're basically at the end of the night. So do appreciate all that. Again, it helps out the channel a ton. But more than anything, we want to make sure that you guys get those notifications whenever we have new content. We appreciate having you guys, either new viewers or regulars, in the chat. Like I always say, we have lots of content, but we would always rather be talking with you than just talking to you. So absolutely glad to have you guys on the stream. And your boy Carr says, just gave you your 100th sub. You're welcome. Laughing. I like it. So thank you, your boy Carr. Glad that we were able to hit that mark tonight. I thought that it might be something that we would hit tonight. So absolutely glad that you were able to get that 100th, and definitely appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you on future streams. It's been a good night of content, just over 2 hours on the show tonight. Hopefully we gave you a lot of good information. Hope that you are able to work your way through all that stuff that's going on the waiver wire tonight to improve your team and continue to march on your way towards your fantasy football playoffs and hopefully a championship. So continued success to everybody. Let's love to hear back from you and let us know how things went. So we look forward to week 4's games this week. Some more good football action and hopefully get those W's. As we always say, it's been a good night here. Good luck in fantasy. We'll see you next time.